On June 7th, the first day of the college entrance exam, the poor little white flower brought a loving breakfast for the entire class. With a rich variety and everything one could ask for, I could tell that something about the taste was off, and I was worried that something might happen to everyone in my previous life. As the class monitor, I persuaded everyone not to eat anything of unknown origin so as not to affect the exam. The study committee member, my childhood friend Xiechenu, looked at me coldly. "Jiang Jing, are you done yet? If you're jealous, at least have some sense of proportion." My classmates also started blaming me one after another. "You're just jealous that the class monitor is nice to the class beauty, so you deliberately said that to mess with her exam mindset, right? Like the stuff you bought is the safest. Like you're the most noble one, right? Your family has a bit of stinky money now and you think you're all that. I didn't take their sarcastic remarks to heart, and after 20 minutes of pleading, they reluctantly put down their breakfast. Everyone performed steadily and smoothly in the college entrance exam, but on the day the results were released, the class beauty didn't make the cut. In a moment of despair, she decided to jump off a cliff, and all of us rushed to stop her. "Thank you for your kindness, classmates. It's my own fault for being so weak-minded, letting the class monitor's words affect my mood and causing me to fail the college entrance exam. I didn't even get into a junior college. What's the point of living anymore?" In the chaos, I was pushed off the cliff by the entire class, falling to my death with not a trace left behind. When taken to the police station for questioning, they all chose to give false testimony. It was Jiang Jing who caused the class beauty to fail the college entrance exam. Overwhelmed by guilt, she took her own life by jumping off the cliff. The class beauty used this incident to play the victim, retook her exams, and started live streaming, becoming an inspirational little white flower goddess in the hearts of countless netizens, gaining both fame and fortune. My parents didn't believe I had committed suicide and wanted to uncover the truth to seek justice for me, but unexpectedly, the class beauty's extreme and mentally unstable fans broke into their home, stabbed them 18 times, and they died from excessive blood loss despite rescue efforts. That night, Xiechenu was right next door, yet he coldly watched it all unfold, only calling 120 after my parents had stopped breathing. It wasn't until after I died that I learned all of this had been done on purpose by the class beauty. When I opened my eyes again, I had returned to the day the class beauty gave everyone a love breakfast. This time, I would never again stop those ungrateful classmates from enjoying them. In the chaos, I didn't know whose hand pushed me off the cliff. The proud laughter of Li Sisi, the class Belle, rang in my ears. "Jiang Jing, I deliberately bought everyone a problematic breakfast. If I can't do well, then no one else is allowed to do well. I didn't originally want to kill anyone. Who told you, you sanctimonious saint, to ruin my plan? Then go die. Only if you die can my character persona become even hotter." After I died, the class Belle Li Sisi went live in front of the cameras, putting on an act of utter heartbreak, although she often bullied me, and on the day of the college entrance exam she even insulted me and hurt my self-esteem, causing me to lose focus in the exam hall and perform poorly. I was still deeply grieved to learn of her death. Over the next year, I'll study hard and retake the exam. I hope all my dear fans will keep following and supporting me. Li Sisi originally had only a small number of followers on her personal account, but because of this incident, she shot up the trending list several times, established a persona as a resilient, impoverished top student and innocent little white flower, and gained over 5 million new followers overnight. Looking at her hypocritical tears, I wanted nothing more than to drag her down to hell with me. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself standing at the assembly point. Xiechenu beside me looked at me coldly and said, "Jiang Jing, are you ever going to stop? Sisi went out of her way to buy us breakfast early this morning. If you're not grateful, fine, but there's no need to act so paranoid and question everything." The other students also began to mock me with sarcasm. "Class monitor, even if you're jealous that the class representative usually treats the class beauty well, there's no need to be so disgusting at a crucial moment like the college entrance exam. Yeah, class monitor, we all know your family is rich, but this is the class beauty's heartfelt gift. How can you sneer at it like that? The class beauty is pretty and has great grades. The class monitor has long had it out for her." I froze for a moment, then slapped myself hard across the face. The crisp crack and the pain made me realize that I had actually been reborn. I burst out laughing like a madwoman. The people who had just been mocking me were all stunned by the sight. What's wrong with her? Did we provoke her too much? Were we being too harsh? The class monitor, Lee Cece, suddenly began to sob softly. Class monitor, I know you've always looked down on me, but there's no need to curse everyone into doing badly on the exam, is there? I only wanted to thank everyone for their care and help over the past year, so I thought of buying breakfast to wish everyone a victorious start. I've been eating these things for 7 or 8 years. How could there possibly be a problem with them? If you don't believe me, I'll be the first to eat it for you. Okay. After saying that, Lee Cece casually grabbed a pancake and stuffed it into her mouth as if in a fit of pique. Xiechenu wiped the tears from her face with a pained expression and shielded her behind him. Jiang Jing, stop with the alarmist talk. Cece has brought us breakfast before, and nothing happened after we ate it. Yeah, I've eaten it before, and it was pretty good too. Nothing happened, did it? Watching the whole class chatter away, all siding with Lee Cece, I dug my nails into my palm, leaving glaring red marks, then took a deep breath. You're right, I was too paranoid, and I shouldn't have misunderstood Cece's kindness. In that case, hurry up and finish eating so you can get to the exam room. I no longer stopped them, and they actually seemed a little unaccustomed to it. A gleam flickered in Lee Cece's eyes as she handed out the breakfast in her hands to everyone. Take a look, everyone. Grab whatever you like, I bought extra. Without my interference, everyone eagerly started dividing up the breakfast. This Jianbing guozi is really delicious. What would you like to drink, soy milk or black rice porridge? Soy milk, please. This baked bun tastes pretty good too. Listening to their lively discussion, I sneered coldly, then pulled out my phone and sent a message. At first glance, the breakfast Lee Cece brought indeed seemed perfectly fine, but since childhood, my senses had been far sharper than other people's. The moment Lee Cece opened the packaging bag, I caught a whiff of something off. I was certain of it. There was absolutely something wrong with these things. After all, the college entrance examination is one of the few crucial turning points in a person's life, so out of caution, I earnestly and tirelessly advised everyone not to eat it. I also had my mother purchase nutritious breakfasts for all 30 students in the class through proper channels and provide them to everyone, but in my previous life, I ended up with not even a trace of my bones left. This time around, I want to see if they can still laugh. I checked my exam admission ticket and stationery one more time, only relaxing slightly after confirming everything was in order. Lee Cece brought a leftover breakfast tray and placed it in front of me. Monitor, this is for you. I looked at her coldly. I don't want it. Instead of being deterred by my coldness, Lee Cece took a few more steps forward, almost pressing against my body. I pushed impatiently. Stay away from me. The corners of her mouth curled into an eerie smile, and she suddenly fell backward onto the ground, the buns and soy milk in her hands scattering everywhere. Class monitor, I kindly offered you breakfast, even if you didn't appreciate it. Why did you have to push me? My foot hurts so much. Xiechnu's eyes instantly turned icy as he rushed over to help Lee Cece up. She had scrapes on her arms and legs, but I clearly didn't use any force, let alone touch her. It wasn't me. But none of them would listen to my explanation. Jiang Jing, you've gone too far. Do you know the college entrance exam is right around the corner? Isn't this all because you can't stand seeing me treat Cece well? Do you really have to hurt her like this? Yeah, class rep, if you don't want to eat it, fine. Why push someone? Just because your family's rich, you think you're something special. I watched coldly as they hurled their accusations at me, and I spoke with a blank expression. I didn't do it. I truly had no desire to keep entangling myself with them. I slung my backpack over my shoulder and was about to step aside unexpectedly. With a single glance from Xiechenu, several tall, burly boys moved to block my way. I frowned. What do you want? Xiechnu's voice was icy. You hurt someone, and now you think you can just walk away. Since you refuse to admit your mistake, then pick up what's on the floor and eat it. We can't let Sai Sai's kindness go to waste. I looked at Xiechenu in disbelief, my heart twisting with a sharp, piercing pain. Watching how affectionate and protective he was toward Lee Cece, I felt dazed, unable to understand why the person I had known for 18 years had become so utterly unrecognizable. During the second semester of sophomore year, Lee Cece transferred into our class for the first time, wearing a set of cheap clothes bought from the wholesale market, completely out of place with everyone else in the class. No one was willing to be her friend. I was the one who took the initiative to say I was willing to be her deskmate, willing to share a dorm room with her. At the time, the high-spirited Siechenu had just come back after playing basketball and discovered that his seat had been moved away, no longer next to mine. He flew into a huge rage. Jiang Jingjing, just for someone so utterly worthless, you're not going to sit with me anymore. Looking at Lee Cece, curled up in the corner and shrinking with fear, I ignored Siechenu's demand that I switch back later. I went to great lengths in private to get Siechenu a limited edition basketball signed by his favorite star, and only then did he finally treat me warmly. Just like that, Lee Cece and I became deskmates, but the timidity and inferiority that had long grown out of her family's circumstances made Lee Cece perpetually fearful and weak, and as a result, she became the target of her classmates' exclusion and teasing. I was the one who put a stop to the classmates' behavior, stayed up late helping her with her studies, and gave her clothes that suited her. She grew more and more confident and radiant by the day, and she also became closer to the other students in the class. But at some point, even Siechenu's gaze had gradually been drawn to her. By the time I realized it, it seemed it was already too late. From a distance, I saw the school-arranged bus for the exam takers seemed to be almost here, and I felt a little more at ease, but I hadn't expected that. In the next moment, Siechenu would signal with his eyes, and two people immediately came to hold me down. "What do you want to do?" I screamed, my heart instantly sinking to the bottom of the sea. "You hurt Cece, and she's generous enough not to hold it against you. For the sake of our classmate relationship, we can let it go, too. But today's breakfast, you're eating it whether you like it or not." "Yeah, class monitor, why don't you just be obedient and pick it up and eat it yourself? That way you'll suffer a little less. Even the class bell has been so forgiving and given you a way out." "Class monitor, you'd better know when you're being given a chance." I looked at this pack of ungrateful classmates. None of them remembered the kindness I'd shown them in ordinary times, and now they had joined forces to accuse me for Lee Cece's sake. What on earth had I done to wrong them? My eyes were red, and my voice trembled. "Siechenu, you bastard." He stared at the intense hatred in my eyes and couldn't help but freeze for a moment. "Did you hurt her? We're all classmates. Take it easy." The two boys pressing down on my hand scratched their heads and asked in confusion. "We didn't even use much force." Chunyu frowned. "Why don't we?" Just as he was about to say something, Lee Cece beside him clutched her wrist and cried out in pain. "Chenyu, my wrist seems to have no strength in it, it hurts so much." She shed a few fake tears. "It's not the class monitor's fault. If anyone's to blame, blame my bad luck for getting injured at this crucial moment. It's just a pity my family isn't as rich as the class monitors. Even if I don't do well on the college entrance exam, there are still other ways for me to get into university." Lee Cece grew more pitiful the more she spoke, and the more she spoke, the sadder she became. Siechenu's gaze grew even deeper, no longer hesitant. He directly had someone pick up the soy milk from the ground. A surge of anger rose in my heart, and I stared wide-eyed. "How dare you?" But the next second, they pinned down my struggling limbs and forced the cold, filthy soy milk into my mouth. I choked and kept coughing, nearly suffocating. These people still didn't stop until not a single drop was left. And only then did they throw away the carton. The soy milk I couldn't swallow spilled all over my face, leaving me in utter disarray. I was shaking all over with anger, staring coldly at Siechenu. 18 years of childhood companionship couldn't even compare to someone he had known for only a year or two. Could it be that my future really means so little? Siechenu tilted his head slightly and didn't look me in the eye. Just then, the shuttle taking them to the exam site arrived, and the whole group boarded the bus as if nothing had happened. Siechenu carefully carried Lee Cece princess style into the car. The whole posture and spectacle made it look as if Lee Cece's legs were paralyzed and she couldn't move at all, even though she clearly didn't even count as lightly injured. The students teasing and cheering rose one after another. Wow, what idol drama plot has just come to life in reality? So sweet. Yeah, if it weren't for the exam coming up so soon, shouldn't they be kissing? Right about now, I took out a tissue, wiped my face clean, and composed myself, standing where I was and watching this group of people Go ahead and laugh. The more happily they are laughing now, the more miserable they will be when they cry later. As for me, although Lee Cece has always loved to lie, she did get one thing right just now. Before the college entrance examination, my parents had already been planning to emigrate, and they had even arranged for me to attend a top university abroad, but I had never been willing to let go of the promise Sietchenyu and I made when we were young, and I resolved to work hard and take the college entrance exam once. I would decide what to do only after the results came out, but I had already foreseen the outcome of this college entrance exam. Even if I rushed there to take it now, it would be pointless. I might as well just give up. Seeing that I wasn't getting in the car, Sietchenyu's expression flashed with panic for a moment. He got out, seized my wrist, and gripped it tightly. Jiang Jing, why are you throwing a tantrum at a time like this? This is a major life event. Lee Cece also hobbled down to persuade me. Class monitor, if you've got any anger, take it out on me. You can't keep everyone else waiting. Yeah, are you getting on the bus or not? If not, forget it, don't waste our time. The people in the carriage also began to chime in. The driver also began to persuade me. Student, hurry and get on. It'd be good for us to arrive at the exam site early and get familiar with the place. I let out a self-mocking smile. I'm not going. You can go on your own. I turned to leave, but Sietchenyu raised an eyebrow and, ignoring my struggle, forcibly pulled me into the car. All right, don't be mad. Didn't we agree to take the Hwadar entrance exam together? A chill ran through me. I honestly had no idea how he had the nerve to say that so casually after treating me like that. Everyone had arrived, and the driver no longer delayed before starting the vehicle. Since I was already on the bus, I casually found a seat and sat down. Seeing that I seemed no different from usual, Sietchenyu didn't say anything more. During the ride, I saw a few girls in the front row clutching their stomachs and rubbing them, as if they were feeling a little unwell. One brave student even asked the driver directly, "Could you find a place to stop and let us use the restroom? My stomach feels a bit bloated." The driver looked at the navigation and shook his head. "Please hang in there a little longer, students. There aren't any public restrooms nearby where I can stop. We're almost at our destination." I curled the corners of my mouth into a mocking smile. Can't take it already. This is only the beginning. I took a small medicine bottle out of my bag and swallowed it with some mineral water. In my previous life, at first, a few classmates didn't take my words seriously and ate a few bites. After my persistent and strenuous persuasion, they eventually gave up. My mom also came over with a team of professional medical staff. On the one hand, they brought everyone a safe and healthy breakfast. On the other hand, they prepared some commonly used first aid medicines for everyone. These students had only slight gastrointestinal discomfort, and after taking some medicine, they were fine again. But not only did these people fail to show any gratitude, they even committed perjury at the police station. He said that the breakfast and medicine my mom brought them were all charged 500 yuan per person. Because of this, my mom was attacked by netizens who didn't know the full story, and our family's stock price also plunged, falling all the way to delisting. Faced with such a group of ungrateful ingrates, I will no longer soften my heart or show them even the slightest bit of goodwill. Lee Cece, who was sitting in front, suddenly took a small medicine box out of her backpack. I brought some common medicines with me. Would anyone like to take some? First, it might help ease the discomfort. At her words, the classmates all relaxed. Our class Belle is so thoughtful. She's such a wonderful person. Yeah, unlike some people who bear the title of class monitor but don't do a single thing right. All they do all day is get jealous, fight for attention, and exclude their classmates. I slumped back in my seat and closed my eyes to rest, no longer caring what they said about me. The exam shuttle successfully delivered everyone to the test center. Some impatient students ran off to the restroom first. The rest chatted and laughed as they headed toward their respective exam rooms. By the middle of the first exam, my stomach had already started to ache dully, but luckily I'd taken medicine beforehand and could still hold on. Just as I finished the first paper and left the exam hall, I saw the principal standing at the entrance with a livid face, along with our homeroom teacher and a crowd of subject teachers. "Jiang Jing, you're the class monitor. Tell me, what exactly happened this morning? Do you know that more than a dozen students in your class 1 were sent to the hospital together? There were several who hadn't been taken to the hospital, and even during the Chinese exam this morning, they kept running to the restroom. Only a few were still normal. Standing beside the homeroom teacher were the only remaining healthy holdouts. When they saw me, their eyes darted away a little. I recounted what had happened that morning in detail. The principal's face grew darker and darker. I warned and warned you before. You absolutely had to be careful with the food, careful and more careful. What on earth is going on with this student? Lee Cece. His voice was so furious it was almost deafening. And the surrounding parents and media all turned their attention this way. My God, that little girl named Lee Cece is truly vicious. Exactly. What she's ruined isn't just one child's future, but an entire family's happiness. But what if it was an unintentional mistake on their part? Didn't the girl herself also end up with problems after eating something and miss the college entrance exam? The principal told the few of us left to focus on the exams with peace of mind he would go investigate the whole cause and effect thoroughly. But unexpectedly, after the math exam that afternoon, as soon as I walked out of the exam hall, someone splashed a bucket of red paint at me. Everyone, come look, it was this person who caused my son to miss the college entrance exam. My son should have had no problem getting into a top university, and now he's still lying in the hospital. It's all because of this bitch. How can someone like you still have the nerve to show up and take the exam as if nothing happened? In the chaos, someone swung a glass bottle at my head, and my forehead was instantly covered in blood. I had no way to defend myself, and just as they were about to attack me again, a sharp shout rang out from the crowd. Stop! My mother hurried over with security and rushed to my side. She supported me tenderly and used an alcohol wipe to clean the blood away. Don't be afraid, Mom is here. Don't you adults feel ashamed? Laying hands on a little girl. Soon, a burly man with a massive frame stepped forward. What little girl? She's the reason my daughter is still in the hospital, vomiting and having diarrhea, and this is the college entrance exam. Such an important turning point. My daughter's whole life has been ruined. Amid the onlookers' chirping discussion, I learned the reason. Lee Cece, even while lying in the hospital, didn't forget to start a live stream. The topic of the college entrance examination already came with enormous traffic, and as soon as the broadcast went live, 1 million people flooded into the live stream room. Tears streaming down her face, she sincerely apologized to everyone. I'm sorry, everyone. I really didn't know things would turn out like this. But everything I did was ordered from behind the scenes by Jiang Jing, our class monitor. I had no choice but to submit to her bullying and intimidation. I really thought it was just buying breakfast for everyone. I didn't know things would develop into what they are today. If I had known earlier, even if it meant risking being bullied to death by her, I would never have done this. Lee Cece promptly showed everyone the cigarette burn scar on her arm as well as the various bruise marks from being pinched, and the sight was truly shocking. She turned the camera toward Xiechenyu. Class rep, at a time like this, are you still going to shield her? Xiechenyu clenched his jaw and, looking toward Lee Cece's abdomen, finally spoke. Yes, Jiang Jing and I have been childhood sweethearts, and I can testify to this. She often took the lead in bullying Cece in class. It was also her who told Cece to buy breakfast this time. She was jealous of Cece for being beautiful and popular, and also jealous of those students with good grades. Maybe, in a moment of panic, she did something beyond redemption. I hope everyone can give her a chance to correct her mistakes. With Xiechen유's testimony, Lee Cece instantly won everyone's forgiveness so easily, simply by presenting herself as the victim. Poor main bro, it's bad enough being bullied, and now he has to take the fall for that bitch too. I'm following you for now, and I've sent you a rocket. Hope you stay safe. That Jiang Jing is such trash, isn't she? How can someone like that even be class monitor? Is there some kind of benefit exchange with the homeroom teacher or something? Damn it, this is the college entrance exam we're talking about. Jiang Jing really deserves to die. Someone born evil like that should have their Gaokao revoked. I second that. In just a few brief words, I somehow became the mastermind behind this accident, and everyone felt that I should be held responsible for it. I had already given up any hope in Xiechenyu, and I never expected him to be this shameless. All I felt was a chill deep in my heart. In that case, there was no need for me to spare them any dignity anymore. The more the man spoke, the angrier he grew, and he even wanted to hit my mom. Like father, like son, everyone, come with me and beat this heartless mother and daughter to death. I'm going to use their blood to pay for my son's life. At once, several parents chimed in agreement. That's right, My daughter is still lying in the hospital. Why should this culprit be able to sit the college entrance exam as if nothing happened? I refuse to accept it. Let's break her hand and see how she's supposed to answer the questions. I explained loudly. They're lying. I didn't bully anyone. And I certainly never told Lee Cece to buy breakfast for everyone. They just don't want to take responsibility. You've all been deceived, but in the midst of the uproar, no one listened to what I said. They punched and kicked my mother and me, and there were only a few security guards, no match at all for those parents who had gone mad with bloodlust. My mom held me tightly under her body, not letting me suffer even the slightest bit more harm. Someone with nothing better to do picked up their phone and started a live stream. Lee Cece and Siechenyu, who were at the hospital, saw it too. Lee Cece looked at how badly I had been beaten and let out a sigh of relief, then looked at Siechenyu with an admiring gaze. Chunyu, thank you. If the baby in my belly had been tormented like that, it definitely would have died. Siechenyu clenched his fist, forcing a grim smile at the corners of his mouth as he comforted her. Just take good care of your pregnancy. Everything will be fine. Watching my mother be beaten until she spat out a mouthful of blood, I was filled with such hatred that my eyes nearly split apart. The humiliation we suffered today, I will definitely exact double the revenge from the two culprits, Lee Cece and Siechenyu. Amid the chaos, the sound of police sirens rang out. My father ran over and roared, "Stop, you fools!" So easily stirred up and so ignorant of the truth. The one truly responsible for your children missing the college entrance exam is Lee Cece, and yet you've still been bewitched by her. I have proof. If you don't believe me, look for yourselves. As soon as those words were spoken, everyone who had been about to act froze. The police connected my father's phone to a huge display screen and began playing the recording on the other side. I found a phone and started a live stream. After all, such a thrilling truth naturally deserved to be witnessed by everyone. Playing on the screen was the surveillance footage from the gathering point earlier that morning. In the footage, it was clear that I had been trying to stop everyone from eating the food Lee Cece had brought. If my daughter had instructed Lee Cece to buy breakfast for everyone, why would she have gone to such lengths to persuade them? Wouldn't it have been better to just watch everyone happily eat it? Every word Dad said was to the point, hitting the key issue exactly. At that, the arrogance of the parents who had been shouting moments ago instantly died down quite a bit. There were also quite a few people in the live stream speaking up for me, insisting I had been wronged. I said we should let the bullets fly for a while first, didn't I? Who knows what the truth really is? Some people can lie without batting an eye. If you've got the nerve, then bring out proof. Exactly. If it were this little girl who ordered it, why would she be so anxious to stop everyone like this? The tide of opinion had begun to shift. There was a trace of panic in Lee Cece's eyes, but she still turned on the live stream with red-rimmed eyes. She looked into the camera and said, "I know the class monitor won't admit it so easily. Look, everyone. This is the transfer record she sent me. If it wasn't because she wanted me to bring her breakfast, why would she transfer money to me?" Lee Cece showed the screenshot on her phone to everyone. Sure enough, it showed that on the night before the college entrance exam, I had transferred a fairly large sum of money to her. Siechenyu also fanned the flames at that moment. At this point, I can't cover for Jiang Jing anymore. Last night, I saw with my own eyes Jiang Jing pull Cece aside and threaten her. I never expected she would still be unrepentant and try to shift the blame onto Cece. Looking back now, she was just putting on an act this morning, afraid we would settle scores with her later. She's really quite cunning. I watched coldly as this husband and wife duo sang the same tune, turning black into white. I did transfer a substantial amount of money to Lee Cece, but that was because after the college entrance exams, everyone had agreed to go on a graduation trip to Fiji. Everyone in the class except Lee Cece had already paid. Knowing she was short on funds, I took the initiative to transfer the money so she could join us. I never expected it would become evidence she used to slander me. In the crowd, those parents started to riot again. What a cunning and vicious woman. My son is still lying in the hospital, and you, this wretch, have the nerve to calmly take the college entrance exam. You beast, give my daughter back her bright future. They were so agitated that they were about to attack us right in front of the police. At the critical moment, the police fired a warning shot into the air to stop these people. My father watched these irrational people coldly without saying a Word, he simply played another video in the video. It was the scene where my classmates held me down and forced me to drink the dirty soy milk that had fallen on the ground. Seeing me being humiliated like this, my mother's eyes also welled up with tears. Jingjing, you've suffered. I won't let these people get away with this. Mom will definitely seek justice for you. The barrage of comments began to shift, but there were still fans defending Li Cici. What does that prove? Maybe Jiang Jing deliberately instructed her classmates to do this, just to clear her own name. Exactly, maybe these classmates have been bullied by Jiang Jing for a long time too. By the way, I looked into it, and Jiang Jing's family background is no small matter. Upstairs, spill the details, spill the details. The internet user's efficiency is truly impressive. They quickly dug up every detail about my family background. Their resentment towards the wealthy reached its peak, with many in the live stream vowing to boycott all of my family's products. Shareholders holding our company's stocks began frantically selling off their shares, causing our stock price to plummet to rock bottom in an instant. I stared directly into the camera and spoke with a chilling tone. Li Cici, Xiechenyu, do you really think I have no other evidence? Are you prepared to face the consequences of your own actions? At that moment, my phone chimed. Li Cici glared at me with a hostile expression, while Xiachenyu's face had also turned pale. After all, they didn't dare to gamble, to bet whether I still had any evidence in my hands that could completely seal their fate. I glanced at the text message. Jingjing, listen to me. I have my reasons. Cece's family is already struggling financially, and if she gets tangled up with these people, it'll be a real mess. Your family has money, so could you help cover for her first? Once this whole thing blows over, I'll make sure she apologizes properly to you next year. Let's still go to Hua University together like we planned. Okay, I let out a scornful laugh. Could Xiechenyu really think I'd still be waiting around for him to come back to me like before? What does Li Cici even amount to? Is her apology worth anything? Why should my life be used to pave the way for her? Just thinking about what happened in my past life makes my whole body tremble uncontrollably. Without any further hesitation, I glanced at my father and received a reassuring look. Everything was already prepared. I sent the evidence I had in hand across the entire internet in an instant. Everyone was in an uproar. In the video, Li Cici was buying breakfast at a food street. The street vendor, noticing her attire that resembled that of a high school senior preparing for college entrance exams, kindly informed her, "Classmate, the college entrance exam is coming up soon. Our food here is heavy on oil and spice, so you'd better not eat it." Anyone with half a brain could hear the hidden meaning in the boss's words, but Li Cici didn't care in the slightest. Instead, she urged the stall owner to keep packing it up. "Auntie, don't worry about things that aren't your business. Just hurry up and pack it for me, or I'll call the Market Supervision Bureau to report you." The stall owner couldn't afford to offend her, so he had no choice but to take on the big order. Li Cici was still refusing to back down, sobbing as she defended herself. "I only acted so aggressively because I was afraid that if I didn't carry out Jiang Jing's orders, she would retaliate against me." By now, 20% of the bullet comments no longer believed Li Cici, but there were still some of her hired trolls flooding the screen. "What kind of evidence is this? It proves nothing. Jiang Jing is the real culprit. Go die." Of course, just watching this video alone proves nothing either. Now for the good part. In a secluded alley, Jiang Jing opened the breakfast items and sprinkled in some white powder that was difficult to notice at that moment. The hospital's forensic report also came out. The white unknown powder contained a large amount of polyethylene glycol, which is also the main ingredient in laxatives. Ever since I was reborn, I had become more guarded. I knew that once something went wrong, Li Cici would still find a way to pin the blame on me. The chances of Xiechenyu and those ingrates of classmates being willing to testify for me were far too slim. I had to save myself, so I sent my dad a message, asking him to hurry up and gather evidence. Fortunately, my father trusted me enough that he didn't press me for the reason in detail. Instead, he immediately had people spring into action, scouring surveillance footage everywhere, so that he could obtain evidence in such a short time and help clear my name. Li Cici was indeed clever. She had picked a corner hidden from the surveillance camera's blind spots, but she had overlooked the dashcam in the zombie car parked by the roadside. The bun she had deliberately thrown to the ground to frame Me was also picked up by the person my father sent and taken to the hospital for testing. Lee Cece's face turned deathly pale. This is impossible. This video has to be fake. AI generated. I clearly, but she quickly realized what she was saying and stopped herself. She began crying like a fountain of tears. Everyone, I really didn't know those things were laxatives. Jiang Jing gave them to me, but she never told me what they were. Sure enough, she wouldn't shed a tear until she saw the coffin. At this point, 50% of the people no longer believed Lee Cece. Instead, they found her tears utterly false. Like crocodile tears, there were still Lee Cece's fans flooding the screen, but the voices speaking up for me were growing more and more numerous. Just when the two sides were each standing their ground, unable to reach an agreement, I played another explosive video. In the video, Lee Cece was sitting bonelessly on a man's lap. The man slapped her but excitedly. "Little slut, you still have the college entrance exam tomorrow. How do you still have time to drag me out to fool around today?" Lee Cece pouted. "I'm not going to take the exam. Every time before, I only managed to keep up the straighter student image by cheating. If I really went to sit for the Gaokao, wouldn't that whole persona collapse? How are you going to come up with an excuse? Pretend you're sick." Lee Cece smiled. "Pretending to be sick is so childish. If I'm going to be sick, I might as well be really sick, and I won't let that group of people in my class off either, who told each of them to have bullied me before. Let everyone have an accident instead that can count as them atoning for what they've done. Anyway, my brother said he'd support me, right? After all, I already have a baby." A faint, unreadable light flickered in the man's eyes. The following scene was a little unsuitable for children, so I cut it out. That said, finding this video was all thanks to my astonishing memory back when I shared a dorm room with Lee Cece. She would often receive an address to a hotel and then start staying out all night. At first, I didn't suspect anything, but after she got me killed and I was reborn, I immediately told Dad. It turned out that once Lee Cece began being accepted by her classmates, she kept wanting to package herself and dress herself up as a rich, beautiful, and privileged girl. To that end, she found a top donor online to keep her. This top-ranked big spender had a peculiar habit. He liked recording videos. That's the only reason this piece of evidence could be preserved. As this astonishing fact came to light, the live stream room erupted, and the barrage of comments flooded the screen. Lee Cece's carefully crafted image finally collapsed, and the truth began to emerge. Holy crap, that's insane. What kind of ghost classmate is Lee Cece? Those who spoke up for her before are getting slapped in the face now. I'm still the best. I didn't make any statement either way. Jiang Jing is really unlucky, getting stuck with someone like that. Lee Cece still wanted to quibble, claiming the video was edited and that I had framed her. Unfortunately, no one believed it anymore. Xiaochunyu's face turned ashen as he stared at Lee Cece in disbelief. "You damn bitch, that child isn't mine at all." The classmate in the next ward was so furious that he yanked out the 4 bottle and came over to settle accounts with Lee Cece. "Lee Cece, you bitch, so it was all your doing after all. You ruined my whole life. I'll never let you off, even as a ghost." The classmates, their eyes red with rage, gave Lee Cece a vicious beating. By the time the hospital security guards pulled them apart, Lee Cece was swollen black and blue, 2 of her teeth had been knocked out, and her hair had been ripped away, leaving her completely bald. After coming to their senses, the classmates broke down in tears of regret. "I was wrong. Why did I believe that bitch?" Lee Cece's words. The class monitor even reminded us. "Yeah, I really let the class monitor down." Some of the students even slapped themselves hard across the face, clutching their heads and crying. Unfortunately, nothing could be undone now. The live stream was cut off at that point. The parents who had learned the truth all stormed toward the hospital to settle accounts with Lee Cece. My parents took me to the hospital to have my wounds dressed, and I didn't force myself to sit the remaining 2 days of the college entrance exam. When I got home, Xie Chunyu was standing in front of my house. His eyes were red from crying, and he kept slapping himself hard across the face. Paired with that handsome, elegant face of his, he looked so pitiful that it was hard not to feel sorry for him. "Jingjing, I know I was wrong. Can you forgive me? Once before, I got drunk and was set up by that bitch Lee Cece, and we ended up sleeping together. She lied to me, said she was pregnant, and that's why I kept siding with her. That's why I hurt you." Listening to him admit his mistake, I felt nothing at all, not even giving him a single glance. No need, the Sietchenyu in my heart had already died the moment you kept hurting me for her. Again and again, Sietchenyu knelt before my family's doorstep all day long, begging for my forgiveness. But I never gave in. After being discharged from the hospital, my classmates also wanted to come visit me together, but I turned them all down. There was no longer any affection or goodwill left between me. And those people, those who had laid hands on my mother and me before, were all sued by my father's lawyer. And of course, they would be punished by the law. After everything had been dealt with, our family officially went abroad later. I heard that Lee Cece was beaten into the hospital by the extremely radical parents in our class, and would have to wear a urine bag for the rest of her life because of this incident. Sietchenyu suffered a severe blow, accomplished nothing, and was shunned by the family, becoming a worthless loafer. Most of those classmates went on to take the college entrance examination the following year, but unexpectedly, the difficulty of that year's exam increased sharply, and most of them didn't even manage to get into a second-tier university at this moment. I was at a top university abroad, listening to my professor's engaging and lively lecture. In this life, I had finally gained the bright future that had always been meant to be mine. Now, let's listen to the next story. The lights at the press conference blazed brilliantly and painfully bright. Ji-Yuan, dressed in a suit and tie, stood on the stage, every gesture and movement exuding the composure of a successful man. At 45, he stood in the city's most prestigious press hall and declared his business empire to the entire world, and I, Ji-Yu Shitsi, his wife, had been arranged to sit in the most inconspicuous corner below the stage, under the pretense of better sharing in his joy. Thank you to my team, thank you to my partners, but I especially want to thank Ms. Liu Yuyan. Ji-Yuan's gaze turned to that elegant figure in the front row, his voice carrying an unusual tenderness. Thank her for all she has given over the years. She is not only my best partner, but also a rare confidant in my life. Soon, the entire press hall erupted into thunderous applause. I watched expressionlessly as Liu Ruyan rose to her feet and politely bowed to those around her. She was wearing a finely tailored dark green gown, and the jade necklace at her throat shimmered brilliantly under the lights. It was bought at last year's auction. When Ji-Yuan spent 12 million to win it from beginning to end, Ji-Yuan never mentioned my name. He didn't even cast a single glance in my direction. At the banquet after the press conference, I stood alone by a table in the corner, the champagne in my hand untouched. Not far away, Ji-Yuan was chatting and laughing with guests from all sides. Liu Ruyan stood beside him like a delicate little bird, occasionally straightening his tie, her gestures so intimate it was as if she were the true hostess of the launch event. "Mom, why are you still here?" His son, Guci, came over with a glass of wine in hand, his tone carrying a trace of impatience. "Aunt Liu still needs to introduce me to a few important clients later. Could you go home first?" I looked at the 23-year-old young man before me, full of vigor and confidence, every feature of his face bearing the shadow of Ji-Yuan's youth. "Your dad thanked everyone tonight except me. Did you know that?" Guci froze for a moment, then put on that perfunctory smile that chilled me to the bone. "Mom, why make a fuss over this? Today's such an important occasion for Dad. Of course he has to prioritize the bigger picture. Besides, you've been managing the household all these years. Do you really need just one extra word of thanks? Aunt Liu is different. She's Dad's business partner and has done a lot for the GU Group." "The GU Group?" I suddenly laughed. "Do you know why the GU Group is called GU?" "Of course. It's because Dad's surname is GU. Guci answered as if it were only natural. I set down my champagne glass and, for the first time, looked at this son I had carried for 10 months and raised through hardship with a scrutinizing gaze. It seemed that after all these years of relinquishing power, some things had become rather interesting. "Son, you're 23 this year. It's time you stood on your own. Starting tomorrow, your supplementary credit card will be cancelled, and your honorary position at the company will also be terminated. Oh, and the house under the company's name will be reclaimed as well," I said calmly. The smile on Guci's face froze, and then he said indifferently, "Mom, stop joking. The GU Group is run by Dad. You should just stay home and take care of the household." I didn't look at him again and turned to walk toward Ji-Yuan in the center of the banquet hall. He was exchanging pleasantries with several investors. When he saw me walking over, his brow furrowed almost imperceptibly. "Ji-Yuan, I cut into their conversation, my voice not loud, but enough for the few people around us to hear. I'm curious. After thanking so many people today, how did you manage to leave me out? Ji-Yuan's smile stiffened, and he said in a somewhat forceful tone, Sishi. Let's talk about this when we get home. He thought I would, as before, give him all the face he needed in front of other people. Go home. I let out a light laugh. The house you live in and the car you drive belong to me, Ji-Yu Shitsi. The startup capital for your company was given by my father, and the 51% stake is held in trust by me, Ji-Yu Shitsi. Even the qualification you have to stand here and hold a press conference today was given to you by me, Ji-Yuan. Have you forgotten that we also made a prenuptial property notarization? You're just a professional manager at my Ji-Yu Corporation. The surrounding voices gradually fell silent, and Ji-Yuan's face turned from green to white. Without me, Ji-Yu Shitsi. After the 9 years of compulsory education, you, Ji-Yuan, should have gone to a factory to tighten screws. I took off the wedding ring I had worn on my ring finger for 25 years and placed it gently on the table beside me. You've had it too easy these past 30-odd years, but starting today, your good days are over. My lawyer's letter will be sent to you shortly. Under everyone's stunned gaze, I turned and walked away the moment I stepped out of the banquet hall. The lights, laughter, and clinking glasses behind me had nothing to do with me. Then, as a matter of course, Ji-Yuan was kicked out of the Ji-Yu group, and everything from my good-for-nothing son was confiscated as well. I could already foresee the miserable life they would lead after being blacklisted by the industry. It was just a shame that two ungrateful wolves had enjoyed such a good life for so many years for nothing. 100 years later, when I opened my eyes again, blinding sunlight slanted in through the window and fell across the exam paper spread out on the desk above my head. The fan hummed. Outside the window, cicadas sang on and on without fatigue. The air was thick with the mixed smell of chalk dust and cheap printing ink, and beside my ear came the rustle of pen tips against paper. Laced with the occasional low cough from the boy in the front row, I sat there dazed, my gaze drifting over the large countdown written in red chalk above the blackboard. Only 30 days left until the high school entrance exam. I lowered my head and looked at my hands. Not only were they fair and slender, but my nails were neatly trimmed as well. On my wrist was a pink digital watch, with a cartoon rabbit printed on the dial. My father had brought this watch back from Hong Kong on a business trip during my 3rd year of middle school. Back then, I had thought it was far too childish and, after wearing it for less than a week, had thrown it into a drawer. How wonderful I had actually been. Reborn. I lifted my head and looked at the geometry problem on the blackboard, a faint smile slowly curving at the corners of my lips. Ji-Yuan, oh Ji-Yuan, this time you should accept your predetermined fate and go work on the assembly line. After taking a deep breath, I began quickly sorting through the situation. It was the 2nd semester of 9th grade, and there was still 1 month left until the high school entrance examination. My father, Ji-Yu Jongwo, was 43 years old, a well-known local entrepreneur. He had built his fortune from scratch, starting in the construction industry, and now had interests in real estate, dining, retail, and several other sectors, with assets worth over 100 million. More importantly, my father was one of the school's board members, which was also why homeroom teacher Mr. Zhong showed her such special care. But now, none of that was the most important thing. What mattered most was that my life could start over again, but the details I had overlooked in my past life, the truths hidden beneath my naivety. Ji-Yuan's sincere expression every time he said, "Uncle Ji-Yu has helped me so much, I'll definitely repay him in the future," and Liu Ruyan's delicate voice, as she timidly said with tearful eyes, "Shitsi, you're so kind, I really envy you." She remembered how, little by little, she had been deceived by those two people and grown farther and farther apart from her other friends. This time, she would stand by and do nothing about Ji-Yuan's life, no longer interfering, and see how high he could soar. The class bell rang. The homeroom teacher, Teacher Zhong, came in through the front door. His gaze swept across the classroom before finally settling on Ji-Yu Shitsi, where he gave a kindly smile. "Ji-Yu Shitsi, come to the office with me." I stood up and followed Teacher Zhong out. As I passed the 3rd row, I felt a gaze fall on me, light as a dragonfly skimming the water, deliberately casual, as though it were nothing more than an accidental glance. But I knew it wasn't. In my past life, I would never have noticed such subtle things. But now I was all too clear about what was hidden behind that kind of look. Without turning back, he walked straight out of the classroom. In the office, Teacher Jong poured a glass of water, asked a few questions about the review, and then offered some earnest advice. Make sure to rest. And don't put too much pressure on yourself. I answered each question one by one, respectful in manner yet neither servile nor submissive. Teacher Jong smiled with evident satisfaction. Your dad even called me yesterday and said you've lost weight lately, asking me to look after you more. Your father is a good man in every respect, except that when it comes to you, he gets terribly nervous. The corners of my mouth lifted slightly, and I smiled without saying anything. I thought of my father in my past life, when he had stubbornly refused to let me marry Ji-Yuan, and how dejected he had looked after I fought back. I thought of how Ji-Yuan wanted to start a company but had no funds, and how I had asked my father for money, only for him to give in to me and wear that disappointed expression. This time, I would not let anyone hurt him too. I remember Ji-Yuan started appearing around me frequently in the second semester of 9th grade. Back then, I was under tremendous pressure because I wanted to prove in the high school entrance exam that I was worth my father's great sacrifices. Once, I secretly cried in the classroom, and it was at that moment that Ji-Yuan handed me a pack of tissues. He said nothing, only sat quietly beside me. That silent companionship made me feel very warm at the time, and made me think that this boy was different from the others, showing up only when you needed him. It was only later that I gradually became close with Ji-Yuan. Ji-Yuan had excellent grades and was often in the top 3 in the grade. He frequently helped me go over problems, but his family was poor. His father was sick and bedridden, and his mother worked in a factory, yet he never complained, always wearing that calm, detached expression that made me think he was strong and full of backbone, which in turn filled me with admiration and pity. Later on, it was only through my incessant chatter around my father that he came to know about this outstanding student in both character and academics. My father then took the initiative to offer to support his schooling, and it was only after my repeated insistence that Ji-Yuan reluctantly accepted all of it. As for Liu Ruyan, she transferred into our class in the first year of high school. Her parents had divorced, and she lived with her aunt, but she was delicate-looking, always speaking in a soft voice. The kind of girl who could awaken a boy's protective instincts. She always seemed to reveal a sense of fragility without meaning to. For example, sitting alone in the shade during PE class, or only getting a vegetarian dish in the cafeteria, or on rainy days when everyone else had someone to bring them an umbrella, while she did not. In my past life, I thought Liu Ruyan was pitiful, so I took the initiative to be friends with her, brought her home for meals, and had my father help pay her tuition. Liu Ruyan also acted deeply grateful, calling me Sister Shitsi one affectionate time after another. But what happened later? Shitsi, a gentle voice interrupted her memories. Ji-Yu Shitsi. I looked up and saw Ji-Yuan standing beside her desk, holding a math workbook in his hand. This was the first time she had seen him up close. Since her rebirth, it had to be said that the 15-year-old Ji-Yuan had refined features and wore a pair of black-rimmed glasses on his face, giving off a distinctly top student vibe. His eyes were very attractive, and his eyelashes were long too. When he looked at someone, there was an earnest concentration in his gaze, as if he would listen carefully to anything you said. In her previous life, what she had loved most was those eyes of his. Now, as she looked into those eyes, she saw only one thing: scheming. I'm not very good at this problem. Could I ask you for some advice? Ji-Yuan handed over the workbook. His fingers were long and slender, and his nails were neatly trimmed. Ji-Yu Shitsi glanced at the problem, a comprehensive problem on quadratic functions, moderately difficult. For someone who ranked in the top 10 of her grade, it was not particularly hard. But the problem was, Ji-Yuan was in the top 3 of the grade. How could someone in the top 3 not know how to do this problem? She did not call him out, only said lightly, "You should know how to do this one." Ji-Yuan's lips froze for a moment, then he smiled, a smile tinged with awkwardness. "I haven't been in a good state lately. My mind's a bit muddled." "Not in a good state, mind muddled. What perfect excuses." Ji-Yu Shitsi picked up a pen and wrote out the solution steps on a sheet of scratch paper. After she finished, she pushed the paper over without saying much. Ji-Yuan took the scratch paper and looked down at it for a moment, then he looked up, his eyes carrying just the right amount of gratitude. "Thank you, Shitsi. You explained it more clearly than the teacher. You're welcome. Ji-Yu Shi's tone was very flat. Ji-Yun seemed to notice something, but he didn't show it. He just smiled again, took his workbook, and returned to his seat. After he left, my former friend Zhao Minute immediately leaned in and said in a voice only the two of us could hear, "Why does Ji-Yun keep coming to ask you questions lately? Isn't his own performance even better?" Then Zhao Minute patted my shoulder thoughtfully. "Cishi, the high school entrance exam is almost here. Some things are best left until after the exam." In her previous life, those same words had left Ji-Yu Shi utterly baffled, but this life she understood them without even lifting her head. She said, "You really are overthinking it." Ji-Yu Shi knew that Ji-Yun really was drawing close to her, but that had nothing to do with any meaning. What he was approaching had never been her as a person, but the boss Ji-Yu behind her. That afternoon after school, Ji-Yu Shi packed up her school bag and headed out, only to run into Ji-Yun again at the school gate. "Shi, you're going this way too?" Ji-Yun asked, his backpack on his shoulders, looking perfectly natural as he walked in the same direction as she did. My home is over by Jianxi Road. What about you?" "Jinsho Garden, that's just along the way." "Then, let's go together." Ji-Yun's tone was casual, as if it were truly nothing more than a coincidence. Ji-Yu Shi did not refuse, but she did not show any enthusiasm either. The two walked side by side along the sidewalk, keeping about half a meter between them. Ji-Yun was very talkative. After chatting for a few moments about the entrance exam, and then a few more about amusing things involving classmates in their class, she kept the balance just right. Neither too eager nor too distant. If it had been her in her previous life, she probably would have found this kind of interaction very comfortable and natural, but now, she only felt exhausted. When they reached the intersection of Jianxi Road, Ji-Yun stopped in her tracks. "I'm here. Thanks for explaining the problem to me today." "You're welcome." Ji-Yun hesitated for a moment, as if carefully weighing his words. You don't seem to be in a very good mood lately. If something's bothering you, you can talk to me. I may not be able to help much, but at least I can listen." Look how considerate, how attentive Ji-Yu Shi looked into his eyes, those beautiful eyes filled with genuine concern. If she hadn't known what happened later, she probably really would have been moved. "I'm fine, thank you." She gave a small smile, so faint it just managed to stay within the bounds of politeness. Ji-Yun nodded, "Then make sure to get some rest." He turned and walked into the alley. Ji-Yu Shi stood where she was, watching his figure disappear at the mouth of the alley, the smile on her face slowly fading bit by bit. "In this lifetime, Ji-Yu. And I won't give you another chance." 3. In the days that followed, Ji-Yun's approach became even more frequent. Sometimes he'd come over during class breaks with an exercise book in hand to ask her questions. Sometimes he'd happen to run into her at the school gate when classes were over. Sometimes he'd sit down at the table beside hers in the cafeteria with his lunch tray. Every time, it seemed so natural, so unintentional, as though he were just an ordinary classmate having ordinary interactions with another ordinary classmate. But Ji-Yu Shi noticed some details. When Ji-Yun came to ask her questions, he always chose the subjects she was best at, so she had no choice but to spend time explaining them, while he got more time to be with her in the same space. Whenever Ji-Yun ran into her, he always chose crowded places, so other classmates would see them walking together and mistake their relationship for something special. When Ji-Yun sat beside her to eat, he would casually bring up his family. For example, "My mom had to work overtime again today, her health isn't great either," or "My dad went to the hospital again these past couple of days, and the medical bills are going up again." He never said these things for anyone else to hear, he said them for her to hear, because only she, the daughter of Boss Ji-Yu, had the ability to help him, and only someone as sheltered as she was, untouched by the hardships of the world, might be moved by such words in her past life. When she heard this, her heart was filled with sympathy and pity, and when she got home, she told her father, "Dad, let's help Ji-Yun." Now she only felt disgusted hearing this, but she showed nothing unusual. She neither responded with the same enthusiasm as before, nor deliberately gave him the cold shoulder. She simply kept a just right distance, polite, yet aloof. This attitude, on the contrary, left Ji-Yun somewhat at a loss in his plan. Ji-Yu Shi should have been an innocent, kind-hearted girl who was easily moved. He had cast out the bait, and she should have taken it, but now she was like a fish circling the lure twice without ever opening its mouth, leaving him unable to gauge how deep the waters really were. But he didn't give up, he needed patience. And Jiyu Shitsi's cold attitude was keenly noticed by someone else, Liu Ruyan. Liu Ruyan sat in the back row by the window, a seat she had chosen herself, saying she didn't want to disturb other people's studying. Her grades were middling at best, and she had a delicate, pretty face. With her hair tied into a low ponytail, she looked like a little white flower that could be scattered by the wind at any moment. She had been paying attention to Ji Yuan for a very long time. In her eyes, Ji Yuan was the perfect target: good grades, good looks, and ambition. Although his family background was poor, that only meant he needed someone by his side to support him and warm him. And she, Liu Ruyan, happened to be best at being the one who stays by his side, supporting him and warming him. But recently, she discovered that Ji Yuan's gaze always seemed to drift toward Jiyu Shitsi, whether intentionally or not. That instantly sent her sense of crisis through the roof. Jiyu Shitsi, the school board chairman's daughter, top 10 in her grade, with a family fortune worth over 100 million. In terms of background, grades, or looks, Jiyu Shitsi was far above her. If Ji Yuan's target was Jiyu Shitsi, then she, Liu Ruyan, wouldn't even have the right to compete. But Liu Ruyan was not the kind of person who would give up easily. She grew up in her aunt's home, and life under someone else's roof taught her how to read people's expressions and gauge their moods, how to survive in the cracks, and how to use other people's sympathy to get what she wanted. She knew where her advantage lay, not in her background, not in her grades, but in that inborn air of fragility, that temperament that made everyone reluctant to hurt her, since she couldn't win by brute force. She would simply change tactics, for at first, it was only a few ambiguous rumors, quietly spreading among the girls. Have you noticed how indifferent Jiyu Shitsi is to Ji Yuan? Every time Ji Yuan goes to her with a question, she acts all impatient. Ji Yuan comes from a poor family. It wasn't easy for him to get into such a good school, and he just wants to learn more. But look at her. She's rich, so she looks down on people. I heard her dad is a member of the school board, which is why the homeroom teacher treats her so well. She probably thinks the whole school should revolve around her. By the time these words reached Jiyu Shitsi's ears, they were already some unknown number of retellings removed. Zhao Minute flushed with anger and grabbed her hand. Somebody's definitely been badmouthing you behind your back. I'll help you find out who it is. Jiyu Shitsi stopped her. No need, the clear will clear itself. Jiyu Shitsi opened her textbook, her tone calm. Unlike that of an ordinary 15-year-old girl, the most important thing is the high school entrance exam. Everything else isn't worth wasting energy on. Zhao Minute looked at her and somehow felt that this classmate of hers had become a little different lately. The Jiyu Shitsi of before had been sensible too, but at heart she was still a little girl. She could be happy all day over a new dress, and sad for days over a single careless remark. But now she was like a pool of deep water, impossible for anyone to see through. Do you really not care? Zhao Minute asked cautiously. Jiyu Shitsi lifted her head, raising an eyebrow. What's the use of caring? If you do badly on the high school entrance exam, those gossiping remarks won't decrease by a single word. If you do well on the high school entrance exam, those gossiping remarks won't increase by a single word either. Rather than wasting time caring about what others say, it's better to spend that time where it should be spent. Zhao Minute nodded emphatically. You're right. Study hard and review. Jiyu Shitsi did not go looking into the source of the rumor, because she already knew who was behind it without needing to investigate. There was only one person who had the motive, the ability, and the means to do it. But she couldn't be bothered to pay attention. The best response was no response at all, scoring a result that would make everyone shut their mouths. That was the most powerful rebuttal. At noon, Jiyu Shitsi's father, Jiyu Zhongwo, sent someone to the school to deliver a nutritious meal. It was the family's driver, standing at the school gate with two large insulated bags. Homeroom Teacher Zhong specially asked the guard to let them through, and also had Zhao Minute accompany Jiyu Shitsi to go get it together. Inside the insulated bags were 4 dishes and a soup, all of Jiyu Shitsi's favorites: sweet and sour ribs, steamed sea bass, broccoli with garlic, shrimp stir-fried with eggs, and a bowl of matsutake chicken soup. Each dish was packed in an insulated lunchbox. When the lid was opened, steam billowed out, and the fragrance drifted far and wide. It happened right at dismissal time by the school gate, and many students coming and going saw the scene. Wow, Gu Shitsi's family is way too nice. They even sent someone to deliver lunch to school. What kind of soup is that? It smells so good. Her father's the school board chairman. What's a bit of pomp compared to that? The murmurs rose one after another, some envious, some sour, and some purely there for the spectacle. Gu Shitsi accepted it all without changing expression. As she passed the school gate, she caught sight of Ji-Yuan and standing off to the side out of the corner of her eye. Ji-Yuan was holding a stainless steel lunchbox. Inside was the cheapest plain noodles from the cafeteria, with a few green vegetable leaves floating on top. His gaze fell on the insulated bag in Ji-Yu Shitsi's hands. Lingering for less than 2 seconds before quickly shifting away, he lowered his head and went back to eating his noodles. Ji-Yu Shitsi saw all of it clearly. It wasn't envy, nor was it jealousy. It was a longing for food, and even more, a longing for another kind of life. That look was like a beast lying low in the grass, spotting prey in the distance, its pupils narrowing, muscles taut, ready to pounce at any moment. What Ji-Yuan wanted to eat had never been the bowl of rice in her hands, but the entire table behind her, and Liu Ruyan, standing not far away, had seen the scene as well. She glanced at the thermal bag in Ji-Yu Shitsi's hands, then at the plain noodles in Ji-Yuan's bowl, and the corners of her lips lifted slightly into an almost imperceptible smile. Then she carried her lunchbox over to Ji-Yuan and said softly, "Ji-Yuan, I had too much food today and can't finish it. Let me share some with you." Ji-Yuan turned and saw the pair of eyes in Liu Ruyan's face, filled with kindness and shyness, and smiled, "Thank you." Liu Ruyan sat down across from him and picked up a few pieces of braised pork from her lunchbox to put into his bowl, her movements natural and considerate. "You're too thin, you should eat more," she said softly, her voice gentle. Ji-Yuan looked at her, and his expression changed slightly, but the shift was so subtle that even Liu Ruyan herself didn't fully notice it. He knew Liu Ruyan had feelings for him. He also knew her circumstances were far inferior to Ji-Yu Shitsi's. But at that very moment, when he was holding a bowl of plain noodles and watching others eat 4 dishes and a soup, the few pieces of red braised pork Liu Ruyan had passed to him did stir something in his heart, but only for a moment. He quickly suppressed that faint stirring and once again turned his gaze toward the girl in the distance, carrying a thermal bag, her back straight and unbending. Ji-Yu Shitsi, that was his real target. 5. The high school entrance examination arrived as scheduled. The weather was lovely over those 2 days of exams, carrying the distinctive scent of summer grass. Ji-Yu Shitsi sat in the exam room, her mind astonishingly calm. Every question on the test paper was far too easy for her. It wasn't because she remembered the answer. She had long since forgotten most of the middle school knowledge she had learned 15 years ago. Rather, it was because in her later years at business school, she had undergone much more intensive training, and her logical thinking, analytical ability, and resistance to pressure were all far beyond the level of a middle school student. After finishing the last exam, Zhao Minute held her hand and said, "I feel like I'm doomed. I had absolutely no idea how to tackle the last big question." Ji-Yu Shitsi patted the back of her hand. "It's okay, just perform to the best of your ability." Zhao Minute looked at her and suddenly said, "Shitsi, you really have changed." "What's changed?" "I can't quite put my finger on it. It's just, you seem much steadier than before. Like you've suddenly grown up." Zhao Minute tilted her head and thought for a moment, "But I think it's a good thing. You used to be too easily influenced by other people. This way is pretty good." In mid-July, the results of the high school entrance exam were released. Ji-Yu Shitsi was admitted to No. 1 middle school in the city, the best key high school in the entire city, with a top 50 ranking citywide. This result caused quite a stir at Yutsai Middle School. Although Ji-Yu Shitsi had always been in the top 10 of her grade, a citywide top 50 ranking still exceeded many people's expectations. Her homeroom teacher, Mr. Zhong, even called her specially, his voice brimming with pride, "I knew you could do it. Your dad called me just now too. He's over the moon." As for Ji-Yuan's score on the high school entrance exam was out as well. He had just barely cleared the admission line for City No. 1 high school. For someone who had been in the top 3 of his grade, this counted as an unusually poor performance, but Ji-Yu Shitsi knew the reason. In that final month, Ji Yuan's mind had never been on his studies at all. He had poured a great deal of time and energy into getting close to her, studying her, and devising all sorts of chance encounters and coincidences. No matter how smart a person is, their energy is limited. Once he turns his attention away from books, a drop in grades is inevitable. What was especially surprising was that Liu Ruyan had also been admitted to one middle school in the city, and by barely making the cutoff as well, her grades had always been in the middle to lower range, so getting into a key high school was already considered an extraordinary performance. Fate really was interesting, even though things hadn't unfolded exactly as they had in her previous life. After all the twists and turns, the three of them still ended up coming to one middle school in the city together to celebrate his daughter's admission to one middle school. Ji Yongwo rarely left work early and came home, personally cooking up a full table of dishes: braised fish, soy braised beef, garlic shrimp, stir-fried seasonal greens, and a large pot of pork rib and lotus root soup. Father and daughter sat at the dining table. Ji Yongwo picked a piece of fish for his daughter and asked with a smile, "Girl, you did so well on the middle school entrance exam. What reward do you want? Dad will agree to anything." Ji Shitsi put down her chopsticks and looked at her father. "Dad," Ji Shitsi said, her voice soft but firm, "from now on, don't casually support poor students." The air fell silent for about 3 seconds. Ji Yongwo looked somewhat baffled, clearly not expecting his daughter to say something like that. He put down his chopsticks and looked at his daughter carefully. There was no willfulness, no sulking, and none of the rebellion or impulsiveness common in adolescence. "Why bring this up all of a sudden?" Ji Yongwo's tone was very gentle. Ji Shitsi was silent for a moment before saying, "It wasn't sudden. I've thought about it for a long time." She didn't give a reason. She couldn't tell him that she had been reborn from 10 years in the future, and she couldn't tell him that among those poor students there was one who wanted to ruin his daughter and seize her property. She couldn't bring herself to say those words, but she wanted to stop this from happening. "In my past life, it was during this summer vacation after the high school entrance exam that Ji Yuan used her to get in touch with her father. He was wearing a school uniform that had faded white from washing, standing at the entrance of the Ji Yu family villa with his head lowered. In a hoarse voice, he said, 'Uncle Ji Yu, my father's illness has worsened again, and our family really can't come up with the money to let me go to high school. I know I have no right to ask you, but..." Before he could finish, he broke down crying, an 18-year-old boy standing at the door of a stranger's house, tears streaming down his face, yet stubbornly refusing to say his request out loud. Anyone with even a shred of compassion would be moved by such a scene, let alone the classmate and friend of one's own daughter. After that, Ji Yongwo not only paid for Ji Yuan's high school tuition, but also helped his father get in touch with the best hospital, and in this life, before that step could even be taken, Ji Shitsi was going to shut the door. Ji Yongwo remained silent for a long time. As for sponsoring poor students, he had done it for so many years. And it was not as though every single time had ended in a good result. Some people are grateful, some push their luck, and some others. He didn't want to think the worst of people, but there really were some who, after receiving help, came to take it for granted and even started harboring thoughts they shouldn't have. "Fine." Ji Yongwo suddenly laughed, his voice bright and hearty. "I'll listen to my daughter. From now on, I won't just help people on a whim anymore. If I'm going to help anyone, it'll have to be with my daughter's approval first." Looking at her father's smile, Ji Shitsi suddenly felt a sting in her nose. "Thank you, Dad." Her voice was somewhat muffled. "What's there to thank? You're my daughter. If I don't listen to you, who will I listen to?" Ji Yongwo picked up another rib for her. "Eat more. You've gotten thinner. I'm telling you, the pressure of high school is even greater, and your health is your greatest asset." Listening to her father's nagging, the corners of Ji Shitsi's mouth lifted slightly. Everything looked just the same as before, but Ji Shitsi knew that the story had begun to shift. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, in a cramped rental room, Ji Yuan was sitting at a desk, staring blankly at an acceptance letter from City No. 1 High School. The paper beside it was covered with analyses of the pros and cons of various plans. 2 names were listed on the paper, Ji Shitsi, Liu Ruyan. Beneath each name were detailed notes, their personality traits, weaknesses, resources that could be exploited, and possible risks. Ji-yoon picked up a pen and drew a heavy line beneath Ji-yoo Shitzi's name. No rush, he had a full 2 months to prepare. The city was beautiful at night. With neon lights flashing, towering skyscrapers, and streams of traffic and pedestrians, the place he lived now was nothing more than a speck of dust beneath the city's glittering facade. But he would not remain a speck of dust forever. He would climb up there, at any cost. Liu Ruyan also received her admission notice from No.1 high school in the city. She placed the notice on her bedside table, carefully combed her hair in front of the mirror, and then smiled at herself in the mirror. That smile was gentle, fragile, and pitiable. Ji-yoon. She softly repeated the name once, then silently recited another name in her heart, Ji-yoo Shitzi. She blinked at the mirror, and her eyes were instantly veiled in a sheen of tears, looking pitiful and delicate in that brightly lit villa. Ji-yoo Shitzi lay on the bed staring at the ceiling, unable to fall asleep for a long time. Ji-yoon would not give up because of this deviation. Liu Ruyan would not give up causing trouble either, but in this life, she was not afraid because she was no longer the innocent, kind, and defenseless Ji-yoo Shitzi of her past life. She closed her eyes, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching the corners of her lips. The gears of fate had already begun to turn, but this time, she would decide the direction of the turning herself. 6. September sunlight was hot and bright, and the entrance to the city's No.1 high school was teeming with noise and people. Ji-yoo Shitzi stood before the class assignment bulletin board, a dark blue backpack on her back and a small suitcase bag in her hand. She wore a simple white t-shirt and jeans, her hair tied into a neat ponytail, and stood out for her quietness amid a crowd of chattering freshmen. Class 1, Grade 10. The advanced class. This was exactly as expected. Ji-yoo Shitzi casually took a seat by the window, pulled out a book, and began flipping through it to pass the time. Soon, the morning homeroom session ended. The homeroom teacher, Ms. Lee, announced the dormitory assignments. Ji-yoo Shitzi and Su Wn were assigned to the same room, a 4-person dorm. The other 2 girls were named Lin Wei and Chen Keek, both students from the advanced class. The 4 of them spent half an hour tidying up the dormitory before heading to the cafeteria together for lunch. The cafeteria was spacious, with 2 floors and so many food counters it was almost overwhelming. Ji-yoo Shitzi picked up a serving of scrambled eggs with tomatoes and a plate of stir-fried seasonal vegetables, then settled by the window to eat slowly. Su Wn sat across from her, eating as she sighed in admiration. This cafeteria is so much better than our middle schools. They even have steak and pasta. Lin Wei picked up the conversation. That's all on the 3rd floor. The 3rd floor is reserved for the international department. We top-performing classes just eat on the 1st and 2nd floors. The international department, Su Wn blinked curiously. It's for the international classes, the ones preparing to study abroad. Tuition is tens of thousands a year. Lin Wei's tone carried a hint of disdain. Rumor has it that the people over there are all loaded. Everything they wear and use is designer brand stuff. They're just not from the same world as us. Ji-yoo Shitzi's chopsticks paused ever so slightly as she picked up some food, but quickly returned to normal international division. After the entrance exams, she had heard from others about Liu Ruyan's destination, the international division of No.1 high school in the city. She just hadn't expected Ji-yoon to be at this school too. Both of them were at the same school, one in the regular class, one in the international division, and she herself was in the honors class. 3 lines briefly converged in the same space, and then each continued on toward a different direction, but Ji-yoo Shitzi knew this separation was only temporary. Given Ji-yoon's personality, there was no way he would quietly stay in an ordinary class and be an obscure, unnoticed student. He would definitely come find her. Sure enough, Ji-yoon had come that afternoon. Ji-yoo Shitzi came out of the teaching building, planning to borrow a reference book for her major from the library. As she reached the 1st floor lobby, a voice called out from behind, "Shitzi." The voice carried just the right amount of surprise. As if an old friend had unexpectedly run into her on a foreign street, Ji-yoo Shitzi stopped in her tracks and turned around. Ji-yoon stood 3 meters away, a backpack slung over his shoulders, that familiar smile she knew so well on his face. "It really is you," Ji-yoon said, hurrying over. "I just saw your name on the class assignment list, and thought it was just someone with the same name. I never expected it to actually be you. What a coincidence." We're at the same school again. What a coincidence. It really was a coincidence. So much so that less than 6 hours after she had just walked through the school gates, he happened to appear in the hallway she had to pass through, so much so that he happened to see her name on the class assignment list, so much so that, among the thousands of people at the entire school, he happened to run into her on the very first day. She didn't respond, just looked at him quietly. Ji-yoon seemed not to notice her indifference and continued with a smile. Which class are you in? I'm in class 7. Even though we're not in the same class, we're at least in the same school. We can look out for each other in the future. Class 1, Ji-yoo Shitsi replied briefly. An advanced class. Impressive. I knew you'd definitely get into an advanced class. Ji-yoon's tone was full of sincere admiration. By the way, you were already really good at math in middle school. If I have questions I can't solve in the future, can I come to you for help? This sentence is exactly the same as it was in middle school. Asking questions, walking home together, catching up with old classmates, his methods have never changed. It's always the same few tricks over and over again in her past life. She fell for this not because he was particularly clever, but because she was too kind-hearted. She believed everyone was sincere and that everyone who approached her had good intentions. Ji-yoon, she spoke up, her voice not loud but clear. We're not that familiar. Don't call me that. The smile on Ji-yoon's face froze. The corners of his mouth still held their upward curve, but the warmth in his eyes had vanished without a trace, replaced by a fleeting, unguarded look of shock and embarrassment. He clearly hadn't anticipated such a response. According to the information he had gathered, Ji-yoo Shitsi was a gentle girl who wasn't good at saying no in middle school. Although her attitude toward him had cooled somewhat compared to before, she had at least maintained basic politeness and courtesy. He thought that at the new school, everything could start over, but he was wrong. Ji-yoo Shitsi's gaze was even colder and more indifferent than it had been back in 9th grade. This indifference was more humiliating than any harsh words could ever be. A few students passing by in the hallway slowed their steps, glancing over curiously. After all, he was still the young Ji-yoon, his skin not yet thick enough to withstand such scrutiny. He took a deep breath, the stiffness on his face lasting less than 2 seconds before a smile bloomed once again. This time, the smile was more restrained than before, as if saying, "It's okay, I understand you." "All right," he said gently, "then I won't disturb you any further." After saying that, he nodded and turned to leave. His steps were unhurried, his back straight, showing no sign of any emotional fluctuation. Ji-yoo Shitsi stood where she was, watching his figure disappear around the corner of the corridor before withdrawing her gaze and continuing toward the library. She did not look back. And once Ji-yoon turned the corner of the corridor and confirmed that no one was behind him, the smile on his face vanished completely. He leaned against the wall, eyes closed, his fingers gripping the strap of his backpack tightly. Not really familiar. Those 3 words were like 3 needles piercing the most sensitive part of his pride. He had been studying Ji-yoo Shitsi since the first year of middle school. He knew all her preferences and habits, what she liked to eat, what colors she disliked, and which animals she was afraid of. He spent a full 3 years carefully planning every chance encounter and polishing every line of dialogue, all for the sake of creating a perfect image in front of her, and with a single not that familiar. She erased all 3 years of his efforts. A glint of malice flashed in Ji-yoon's eyes, but he quickly suppressed that trace of emotion. No, he couldn't rush things. High school had only just begun. He readjusted his expression and stepped out from around the corner, blending into the flow of people coming and going like an ordinary freshman. And Ji-yoo Shitsi found a copy of Principles of Economics in the library. Sitting by the window, she opened the first page and began reading from the beginning. She read very seriously, taking notes neatly and carefully, and before she knew it, more than 2 hours had passed. By the time she closed the book and walked out of the library, the sky was already growing dark. As she was walking back to the dormitory and passed by the International Department's teaching building, she subconsciously looked up. The International Department building stood alone, its outer walls painted a light gray. The windows were a size larger than those of the ordinary teaching buildings, and with the lights on inside, she could make out a few students in uniform moving about. Their uniforms were a little different from those of the regular department, better tailored, with fabric that looked nicer too. Ji-yoo Shitsi withdrew her gaze and kept walking forward. She didn't know whether Liu Ruyan was in that building right now, or what she was doing, but she knew that with Liu Ruyan's personality, she would never be content to remain unnoticed in the international department. Neither of them would ever settle down, but that was their business. What she needed to do was stay on her own path. 7. In the fourth girls' dormitory building of the international department, in the easternmost room, Liu Ruyan lay in bed, tossing and turning, unable to fall asleep. Her bed was by the window at the innermost spot. A lavender scent drifted from her pillow, and the smell of the sleep aid spray still hadn't completely faded, but her mind was unnaturally alert. She was thinking about Ji Yu. And she had been looking for an opportunity to get close to Ji Yuan. She had passed by near the teaching building of the general department, bumped into him at the window in the cafeteria he often visited, and even asked someone to inquire about his class schedule and daily routine, but every time they ran into each other, Ji Yuan would only nod politely, then leave in a hurry, his gaze always searching for something. Or rather, for someone. Liu Ruyan knew who he was looking for. Ji Yu Shitsi. She rolled over, buried her face in the pillow, and forced herself not to think about it anymore. Then her consciousness began to blur. She felt as if she was sinking into a very deep, very dark body of water, surrounded by blackness and suffocating water. She struggled to swim upward, until she broke the surface, then suddenly opened her eyes. It wasn't the dormitory ceiling, it was a vast, splendidly opulent banquet hall. Crystal chandeliers hung from a dome more than 10 meters high, refracting countless tiny points of light that fell over the densely packed guests below. Everyone was applauding, the sound thunderous, rattling her eardrums. She looked down at herself, wearing a dark green long dress, its hem dragging on the floor, and a pair of rhinestone-studded high heels on her feet. Her arm was linked with a man's. He was dressed in a finely tailored black suit, tall and straight-backed, the sharp lines of his profile clearly defined. Ji Yuan, but not the Ji Yuan she knew. This Ji Yuan looked far more mature than the one in her memory, probably just over 30. The boyish innocence and awkwardness were gone from between his brows, replaced by a composed, self-assured air of success. He stood beneath the spotlight, smiling as he waved to the people below the stage, every gesture carrying the air of a successful man, and she herself was standing right beside him. In her dream, Liu Ruyan felt an immense sense of fulfillment and pride. She was the object of everyone's envy at the banquet. Those who had once looked down on her now had to crane their necks just to see her. The scene changed, the same banquet hall, the same spotlight, but this time she saw someone sitting in the corner. Ji Yu Shitsi. She was wearing a plain black dress, her hair loosely draped over her shoulders, utterly out of place in this gilded and magnificent setting. In her hand, she was clutching a ring, her knuckles white, and the expression on her face. Liu Ruyan stared at it carefully in her dream for a long time before finally recognizing what that expression was. It was a profound, weary disappointment. The scene shifted again. Ji Yuan stood on the stage at the press conference, microphone in hand, speaking to the thousands of people below. He said many things, thanking this person, thanking that one, and the applause rolled in wave after wave. Liu Yuan stood at the side of the stage and heard him announce to all the guests present that she was his rare confidant. Liu Yuan jolted awake from her dream. She sat up in bed, gasping for breath. The back of her pajamas was soaked through with cold sweat, clinging to her skin, icy and piercing. The dormitory was quiet. Her roommates were all sleeping soundly, and only the hum of the air conditioner and the sound of her own ragged breathing echoed in the darkness. Liu Ruyan leaned against the headboard and spent a full 10 minutes calming her breathing. The images in her dream were too vivid, so vivid that she could remember the scent of champagne in the banquet hall, feel the hem of her evening gown brushing against her calves, and hear the faint electric buzz from the microphone when Ji Yuan spoke on stage. Those were not dreams. She didn't know why she had suddenly dreamed of all that, but she was absolutely certain those things had really happened. Standing beside Ji Yuan was her. The one who had attended countless press conferences in evening gowns was her, and Ji Yu Shitsi only deserved to stand forlornly in the corner. Liu Ruyan sat in the darkness, her fingers clutching the blanket so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Strangely, a powerful, hotter emotion rose in her heart. Excitement. If Ji Yuan had truly succeeded in his past life, if he had really become a great entrepreneur, then why couldn't she have held on to him from the very beginning? She didn't know how Ji Yuan had succeeded, but she knew the final result. Ji-yoon meant success. If the her in the dream could stand beside him, then the her now could too, and this time, she would be there from the very beginning. Liu Ruyan's eyes shone brilliantly in the darkness this time. She fell asleep very quickly. A faint smile curved the corners of her mouth. From that day on, Liu Ruyan began her investment plan. She started taking the initiative to get close to Ji-yoon. No longer the ambiguous probing of middle school days. Ji-yoon, she greeted him with a smile. What a coincidence. You're here to eat at this time too. Ji-yoon turned around and saw Liu Ruyan. He smiled politely as well. I just got out of class. Are you alone? I'm alone too. Let's sit together. As she spoke, Liu Ruyan naturally walked over and sat down at the table beside him, then pushed the braised beef set meal in front of him. I made an extra serving today and can't finish it. Help me eat it. Ji-yoon looked at the braised beef set meal in front of him. The beef was stewed until tender and soft, with greens and steamed egg on the side, forming a sharp contrast to his plain fried rice. No need, I'm fine with this, he politely declined. Don't be so polite, I really can't finish it, and it'd be such a waste, Liu Ruyan said in a light, natural tone, as if this were truly just a coincidence, an ordinary helping hand between classmates. Help me out with this, and I'll feel a little less guilty. Ji-yoon hesitated for a moment. But in the end, he didn't refuse again. He picked up the set meal and took a bite. The aroma of beef spread across his mouth. It had been a long time since he had eaten such a decent meal. He knew what was going on at home. His father's illness needed money, and his mother's wages from the factory were only just enough to keep the household going. He had to save every penny he could. Thank you, Ruyan, he said, his voice a little low. Liu Ruyan smiled and shook her head. What's there to thank me for? Isn't it only right for classmates to help each other? Her smile was gentle, sincere, and perfectly measured. It didn't make people feel as though she were offering charity, nor did it seem like she was deliberately trying to curry favor. She was merely doing a favor. But Ji-yoon was no fool. Once is a coincidence, twice is luck, and 3 times is deliberate. By the 3rd time Liu Ruyan happened to get an extra serving at lunch, the 4th time there were just so happened to be spare review materials, and the 5th time she casually topped up his meal card. Ji-yoon finally became certain of one thing. Liu Ruyan was pursuing him, and not some girlish, superficial, fleeting kind of crush. Ji-yoon sat in the classroom, holding a math study guide Liu Ruyan had just thrust into his hands. The latest edition on the market, priced at 89 yuan. He had flipped through it in the bookstore before, but hadn't been willing to buy it. He turned to the title page, where a delicate line of handwriting had been written in ballpoint pen. Ji-yoon, keep it up. You can definitely do it. Ji-yoon looked at those words, his expression complicated. Ji-yoo Shitsi from the first year of junior high, he had been preparing for this goal, but Ji-yoo Shitsi's attitude toward him had grown unusually cold starting in 9th grade, and by the time they reached high school, she had pushed him clear out of her life. Those words, "We're not that familiar," still felt like a thorn buried in his heart to this day. But Liu Ruyan was different. Liu Ruyan was proactive, passionate, and never expected anything in return. Although her family wasn't fabulously wealthy or powerful, the fact that she could attend the international division at least showed that her background was quite good. More importantly, Liu Ruyan had a good impression of him. This kind of goodwill was genuine, willing to be given to him, and didn't require him to exhaust every scheme and stratagem just to win it over. Ji-yoon closed the tutoring book and leaned back in his chair, eyes shut, weighing the pros and cons. Ji-yoo Shitsi was his first choice, but she was far too difficult to win over, and her rejection of him was growing stronger by the day. So strong that he felt even if he spent another 3 years, he still might not be able to pry open even the smallest crack. Liu Ruyan was the second choice. She was much easier, and the payoff would come much faster. She was right beside him now, able to resolve the predicament he was facing at this very moment, but he was unwilling. No matter how good Liu Ruyan's family background was, it couldn't compare to even 1/10,000th of the Ji-yoo group. Ji-yoo Jongwo's assets were worth over 100 million, with interests spanning real estate, catering, and retail. He was the very image of a true elite family, and Liu Ruyan, she fell far short of what he wanted. By more than just one order of magnitude. A glint of cold light flashed in Ji-yoon's eyes. Why choose one of the two? He could have both. On one hand, He could accept Liu Ruyan's kindness and use her money to improve his life and preserve his dignity. On the other, he could continue looking for chances to get close to Jiyu Shitsi. Waiting for the day her attitude softened. Once Jiyu Shitsi makes progress, Liu Ruyan can be cut off at any time. After all, he never made any promises to her. Everything was her own choice. Ji-Yuan reopened the tutoring book and began to study it seriously. The corners of his mouth lifted slightly, revealing a barely noticeable smile. Meanwhile, Liu Ruyan was also smiling as she sat in the classroom of the international department. She did not know what was going on in Ji-Yuan's mind, she only knew one thing. Ji-Yuan was beginning to accept her kindness. He ate the meals she bought, took the books she bought, and used the money she had topped up for him. All of this showed that he was slowly, little by little, accepting her. Once he could no longer live without her, she would win. Two venomous snakes, slowly drawing near in the darkness, coiling around each other. One thought it had found a gold mine, the other thought it had found a way out. Neither knew that the entwined venomous snakes would ultimately fall into the abyss together. 8. When Ji-Yuan and Liu Ruyan were probing each other, what was Jiyu Shitsi doing? She was studying. In the midterm exams of the first semester of her first year in high school, Jiyu Shitsi placed third in the grade. For this, her homeroom teacher, Teacher Li, even specially talked to her once to encourage her. Occasionally, when passing the classroom of the regular class, she would accidentally glance inside. Ji-Yuan sat in the third row from the back by the window, head lowered as he worked on his test paper. He was still wearing that faded blue jacket that had been washed white, but the t-shirt underneath had been changed to a new one. At least not the kind of old shirt from middle school whose collar had gone all loose. Jiyu Shitsi withdrew her gaze, her steps never faltering, her breathing unchanged, and her expression showing no ripple of emotion in her heart. Ji-Yuan no longer even counted as a passerby. Passers-by owed her nothing, but Ji-Yuan did. Yet, debt or not, she had no intention of resorting to those despicable means for revenge. The best revenge in this life was not to make him suffer, but to turn him completely into a nobody in her world, let him fall into the depths of his own desires. The days of the first semester of freshman year passed without much happening. In these past few months, the relationship between Ji-Yuan and Liu Ruyan had warmed rapidly. Liu Ruyan had practically covered all of Ji-Yuan's daily expenses, his meal card, study materials, and clothes. At first, Ji-Yuan would still be polite and say a few words of thanks. But gradually he became more and more entitled. Now, he even started to give perfunctory thanks to Liu Ruyan. People often take for granted the warmth that is within easy reach, and they tend to overlook the things they have had since birth. Moreover, his attention had never shifted away from Jiyu Shitsi. Ji-Yuan began to insist on his chance encounters. He found out the route Jiyu Shitsi took home from school every day, calculated the time, and arrived at that intersection 10 minutes early, leaning against a plane tree, pretending to be on his phone. When Jiyu Shitsi turned the corner, Ji-Yuan took a deep breath and stepped out from under the tree. "Shitsi," he called out, his voice carrying just the right amount of weariness and melancholy. Jiyu Shitsi stopped in her tracks and glanced at him. "I have something I want to say to you." Ji-Yuan stepped forward, his gaze sincere. "I know you might think I'm annoying, but I can't help myself. Ever since middle school, His words trailed off before he could finish. A black Mercedes-Benz S-Class sedan pulled up from the intersection and came to a steady stop right in front of Jiyu Shitsi. The window rolled down, and the driver leaned out, saying, "Miss, please get in, mister. Jiyu said the roads are congested today and asked you to head back early." Jiyu Shitsi opened the car door and got inside. From start to finish, she didn't spare Ji-Yuan a second glance. The car started up and drove past Ji-Yuan, stirring up a gust of wind that tousled the stray strands of hair on his forehead. He stood there watching the black car merge into the traffic, moving farther and farther away until it finally disappeared at the end of the road. His fists clenched and unclenched, unclenched and clenched again. "Ji-Yuan, we're not that close." This sentence, this scene, flashed through his mind. He gritted his teeth and repeated Jiyu Shitsi's name countless times in his heart, not out of longing, but out of hatred. But hate aside, he did not give up if she ignored his chance encounters. He would wait for another opportunity. As long as she remained at this school, as long as he was still her classmate, he would eventually find a breakthrough. All he needed was patience, and patience was the one thing he had in abundance. 9. In the first month of the second semester of high school, a major event occurred. Ji-Yuan's father had an accident at the construction site that day. Ji-Yuan was in the middle of class when the homeroom teacher pushed the door open and called him out to answer a phone call. He walked to the hallway, picked up the receiver, and heard his aunt's anxious voice on the other end of the line. "Your dad's had an accident. He fell from the scaffolding and broke his leg. The contractor ran off. No one's covering the medical bills. And the hospital says they need 30,000 yuan upfront before they'll operate." Ji-Yuan's hand holding the receiver began to tremble. His mind went completely blank. The figure of 30,000 yuan pressed down on him like a mountain, suffocating him. 30,000 yuan. Where on earth could he get 30,000 yuan? Mother earns a little over 4,000 a month tightening screws at the factory. His monthly stipend of 500 yuan barely covers his own living expenses. Ji-Yuan stood dazedly in the corridor, his shoulders trembling slightly. He wasn't crying. He was thinking who could help him. The school. The school had scholarships and emergency aid, but the application process would take at least 1 or 2 months. His father couldn't wait that long. Liu Ruyan had already given him quite a lot of money over the past few months. If he asked her again, even if she were willing to give, her aunt would never agree. Then who else was there? Ji-Yuan slowly raised his head, a flicker of resolve flashing in his eyes. Ji-Yu Shitsi, only Ji-Yu Shitsi. Her family's assets were worth over 100 million, and 30,000 yuan was nothing more than a drop in the ocean to her, and her father was famous for his philanthropy, having sponsored countless impoverished students. If he could move Ji-Yu Shitsi, not as a suitor, but as a poor soul with nowhere else to turn, she might help him. Not might, she would. Ji-Yuan knew Ji-Yu Shitsi. No, what he knew was the Ji-Yu Shitsi of his previous life. That kind-hearted, soft-hearted girl who couldn't bear to see others suffer. In her past life, even a wounded stray cat by the roadside would make her stop and think of a way to save it, let alone a living, breathing person. As long as he told the story with enough misery and kept his posture low enough, she would surely soften. Ji-Yuan adjusted his collar and took a deep breath. He was about to go play the pity card. After the afternoon class, Ji-Yuan blocked Ji-Yu Shitsi in the corridor. He had chosen the timing very cleverly. After school, there were few people in the corridor, but it wasn't completely empty. That way, it wouldn't seem too deliberate, and yet it also wouldn't make Ji-Yu Shitsi feel unsafe from having no one around to witness it. He stepped out from the corner and blocked Ji-Yu Shitsi's path. "Zishi," he called her name, his voice hoarse and his eyes reddening. Ji-Yu Shitsi stopped and looked at him. Ji-Yuan's eyes were indeed red. His father's injuries were even more serious than he had imagined. The doctor said that if surgery wasn't performed soon, they might not be able to save the leg. "I know you don't like me." Ji-Yuan kept his voice very low, with a deliberate tremor in it. "I also know you think I'm annoying, but I really have nowhere else to turn. I don't know who else I can ask." His voice broke off. He lowered his head, as if desperately holding back his tears. A few students passing by in the corridor slowed their steps and glanced this way, their eyes filled with sympathy and curiosity. Ji-Yu Shitsi said nothing, only stood there quietly looking at him. "My dad had an accident at the construction site." Ji-Yuan lifted his head, his eyes brimming with tears, but they did not fall. "My leg is broken, and the foreman ran off. The medical bill is 30,000 yuan. My mom works in a factory and only makes a few thousand yuan a month. Our family can barely afford food, so where are we supposed to get 30,000 yuan? His voice grew lower and lower, hoarser and hoarser. "Zishi, I know I have no right to ask you, but I really have no other choice. For the sake of being classmates, could you lend me some money? I'll definitely pay you back someday. I swear." He raised his right hand in an oath, his fingers trembling slightly. Ji-Yu Shitsi looked at him. She looked at the young man standing before her, his eyes red, his voice hoarse, his hand raised in solemn oath. She thought of the man from her past life, the one who had stood at the press conference in a suit and tie, full of vigor and confidence. He had stood beneath the spotlight, smiling at the thousands upon thousands of people below the stage, every gesture radiating the bearing of a successful man, and now, that same man stood before her, humbly begging her to lend him 30,000 yuan. The same face, the same soul, only the shell was different. One was a successful entrepreneur wearing a borrowed suit, the other a poor student in a school uniform. whether in his past life or this one, Ji-Yoon had always been a parasite. Only in his previous life, he had latched onto the great tree that was the Ji-Yu group, while in this life, he could only survive by feeding on the goodwill of Liu Ruyan and his classmates. Ji-Yoon, Ji-Yu Shitsi spoke, her voice not loud, but very clear. Ji-Yoon looked up. A spark of hope kindling in his eyes. What happened to your family? I deeply sympathize. Ji-Yoon's eyes brightened for a moment, but that glimmer of light was snuffed out in an instant. The school has scholarships, emergency relief funds, and all kinds of donation channels. You should go to your homeroom teacher and have the school step in to help you solve this. I can't help you. Ji-Yoon's expression changed. The sadness and fragility on his face were like a layer of peeling paint stripped away, revealing beneath it urgency and irritation. But the school procedures take forever. My dad can't wait that long. Your family's situation. His words came to an abrupt halt, because he saw the look in Ji-Yu Shitsi's eyes change. It wasn't anger, nor disgust, but a kind of calm so cold it seemed to seep into the bones, sending a chill down one's spine, like winter lake water, its surface frozen over, with bottomless darkness lying beneath the ice. My family has money, that's my business. Why should I lend it to you? She enunciated each word one by one, each one striking Ji-Yoon's face like hail. The hallway fell silent, so quiet that one could hear the whistle from the playground in the distance and the rustling of wind through the leaves. Ji-Yoon opened his mouth, wanting to say something, but it was as if his throat had been blocked by something, and not a single word could come out. Ji-Yu Shitsi did not look at him again. She turned sideways and walked past him, her pace unhurried, her back straight and rigid. She had only taken a few steps when Ji-Yoon's stifled voice came from behind her. Ji-Yu Shitsi, you're really heartless. The voice wasn't loud, yet it echoed down the corridor. A few passing students jumped in fright and turned to look. Ji-Yu Shitsi did not turn around, her steps did not falter, her breathing did not change, and even the corners of her mouth curled slightly into a faint, weary smile. Cold-blooded. She had heard that word countless times in her previous life. Ji-Yoon called her cold-blooded when she refused to give him money again. Liu Ruyan called her cold-blooded when she refused to transfer the school district apartment to her. Those people who had once repeatedly said, "You are the kindest person I've ever met," all showed the same face the moment she refused to satisfy their demands. You're so cold-blooded. She walked down the stairs and out of the teaching building. This was an evening that belonged to a 15 or 16-year-old boy, but Ji-Yu Shitsi knew that she had never been an ordinary 15-year-old girl. Within her heart lived the soul of a previous life. That soul had seen the ugliest side of human nature, and it had also seen the warmest. She knew where the boundaries of kindness lay, and she knew how to measure the proper limits of refusal. She was not cold-blooded. She had simply learned to keep her warmth for the people who were worth it. Ji-Yoon stood in the hallway, watching Ji-Yu Shitsi's figure disappear at the stairwell, feeling as though the life had been drained out of him. He leaned against the wall and slowly slid down to the floor. He had failed. His carefully designed pity-selling plan had failed. He had thought Ji-Yu Shitsi would soften, and that when she saw his tears, she would hand him a pack of tissues and then softly say, "Don't cry, I'll help you." But she didn't. She didn't even spare him a second glance. Ji-Yoon sat on the cold floor tiles, burying his face in his knees. This time, the tears truly came, not only because of his father's injuries, but because of a deeper, more hidden sense of defeat. He suddenly felt like a magician whose trick had been exposed. All his skills, all his calculations, all his disguises, were like paper in front of Ji-Yu Shitsi. One poke, and they tore apart. The way she looked at him was as if she were looking at someone transparent. That feeling was even more humiliating than any insult, leaving him utterly ashamed. But just when he had fallen to the very bottom, a hand reached out. Ji-Yoon, he lifted his head and, through blurred eyes, saw Liu Ruyan standing before him, holding a paper bag, her face marked with concern. "Why are you crying?" Liu Ruyan crouched down, set the paper bag aside, and reached out to help him up. Ji-Yoon looked at her. The girl who had quietly given so much for him over the past few months. Her eyes held genuine worry, her hand was warm, and her voice was soft. At that moment, a complex emotion rose in Ji-Yoon's heart, one he was not quite willing to admit. It was a kind of dependence, like a drowning man clutching the last floating log. "Ruyan, Something happened to my dad. His voice was so hoarse it was almost inaudible. He briefly explained what had happened. After listening, Liu Ruyan fell silent for a few seconds, then took out her phone from her pocket. How much money do you need? 30,000. Liu Ruyan quickly tapped a few times on her phone screen, looking at the remaining 24,000. Then she looked up. I can transfer you 15,000. You'll have to figure out the rest yourself. Ji Yuan froze. You, stop talking. Liu Ruyan stood up and pulled him to his feet as well. Your father's life is what matters. Go to the hospital first. Ji Yuan looked at Liu Ruyan, his eyes turning red again this time. They were truly red. Ruyan. Thank you. I'll definitely pay you back someday. 10 times, 100 times over. Liu Ruyan smiled and reached out to pat his shoulder. All right, enough with the sentimentality. Hurry. And get to the hospital. Ji Yuan nodded and turned to run downstairs. Liu Ruyan stood in the corridor, watching his figure disappear at the stairwell. The smile on her face slowly faded. Little by little, she leaned against the hallway railing, took a candy from her pocket, unwrapped it, and put it into her mouth. It was strawberry-flavored candy, but there was no trace of sweetness in her heart. She had originally planned to use this money to slowly invest in Ji Yuan, taking the long view and making him depend on her little by little, but now, she had poured it all in at once. Was it worth it? She asked herself inwardly. Then she remembered the scene from her dream. Ji Yuan beneath the spotlight, the launch event thunderous with applause, and herself standing beside him in an evening gown. It was worth it. As long as she could become the person by his side. What did this money amount to? What she didn't know was that in her past life, Ji Yuan's success had not come from his own abilities, but from Ji Yuxi's resources and funding, and the project she invested in was doomed from the very beginning to end in total loss. But she didn't know that. She only knew that Ji Yuan was equal to success, and she wanted to be the woman by a successful man's side. Liu Ruyan crumpled the candy wrapper into a ball and tossed it into the trash can, then turned and walked toward the dormitory. Her footsteps on the tiled floor made a crisp, rhythmic sound. Tap, tap, tap. Each step landed steadily, confidently, as if she were walking on a red carpet leading into the future. 10. By the end of freshman year of high school, the three of them were already headed in completely different directions. Ji Yuxi began taking part in all kinds of competitions. She won first prize nationally in a math competition, and her name was written on the school honor roll, with her photo posted in the most eye-catching spot on the bulletin board. In the photo, she wore a white shirt, her hair tied back in a ponytail, a faint, almost imperceptible smile at the corners of her mouth. Su Wn stood in front of the honor roll with her hands on her hips and sighed. Ji Yuxi, can't you be just a little more ordinary? You make me look completely useless. Ji Yuxi smiled and shook her head. You're not useless. You ranked 15th in the grade this time. That's already amazing. There are 14 people between 15th in the grade and 1st in the grade. But even if you added them all together, they still couldn't reach you. Su Wn gestured exaggeratedly. You know what? Our classmates privately call you the janitor monk, quiet as a mouse on normal days, but the moment you make a move, it's a royal flush. Janitor monk, yeah, the kind of recluse who looks utterly ordinary, but in fact has the greatest martial arts in the world. Su Wn counted on her fingers. Look at you. You don't like talking, you don't join clubs, you don't date. You don't post on social media. Every day it's just classes, meals, studying, and sleep. But you always score better than everyone else on exams, finish problems faster than everyone else, and even win first prize in national competitions. If you're not some hidden master monk, then what are you? Ji Yuxi was amused by her and laughed. Alright, then I'll be the hidden master monk. Satisfied, Su Wn nodded, then lowered her voice. By the way, did you know, Ji Yuan has been disciplined? Ji Yuxi's smile didn't change. No, what happened? He spread rumors about you at school, saying you were a gold digger, that you toyed with his feelings and all that. In the end, a few guys in our class couldn't stand it anymore, and after school they cornered him in the alley behind the school and gave him a beating. Su Wan's face carried a hint of schadenfreude. Then the homeroom teacher got involved and investigated the matter. Ji Yuan was given a demerit. I heard his scholarship was revoked too. Ji Yuxi said nothing, only gave a slight nod. As for the scholarship being revoked, she knew more about it than Su Wn did that day, when her father asked her, "Is there a boy who keeps bothering You all the time, she simply said. His name is Ji-Yuan. Her father nodded and didn't ask any more questions. The next day, Ji-Yuan's scholarship was revoked. As for the rumors Ji-Yuan spread, she didn't care at all. The students in the top class were all sharp cookies. No one would believe the nonsense a boy who had already been disciplined was spouting about a girl who ranked first in the grade. There's one more thing. Su Wn leaned in even closer, lowering her voice even further. Liu Ruyan. Transferred schools. Ji Shixi's eyebrows moved slightly. Transferred schools. Yeah, from the international department. I heard she was running some kind of clique at school, ostracizing her classmates, and got warned by the international department's administration. Then she transferred schools and went to a private high school in the east of the city. Su Wn looked at her expression and hesitated before asking, Shici, do you really not care about these things? Care about what, I mean? These people, aren't you even a little angry? Jiu Shici turned her head and looked at Su Wn. Su Wan's eyes held no gossip or curiosity, only a pure and sincere concern. Su Wn, Jiu Shici said, do you know what the most precious thing a person has is? What? Time. My time is very precious, Jiu Shici said indifferently. I want to use it to learn, to think, and to do things that truly matter. I don't have any extra energy to care about people who aren't worth caring about. Su Wn looked at her. And after a long while, said softly, Shici, you really do seem like an adult. A lot of people say that, but you're like this, and that's fine, really fine, Su Wn said earnestly. Two girls stood side by side in front of the honor roll, the sunlight bathing them in a gentle warmth. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Ji-Yuan sat alone in an empty classroom, staring blankly out the window. The scholarship had been cancelled, and the changes in his family's circumstances meant he couldn't even afford his tuition on the phone. His mother cried and said, why don't you take a year off from school first? Once your father's leg gets better, we'll think of another way. Drop out of school. He couldn't drop out. Once he did, he would never be able to come back. He would be left behind by this city, this society, this era, and would never catch up again. He clenched his fists so tightly that his nails dug into his palms. Liu Ruyan transferred schools. Before she left, she sent him a message saying, something came up at home, I have to transfer schools, take care of yourself. After that, she never contacted him again. He had sent her messages and called her, but there was no response. The line to Liu Ruyan had also been cut off. Now he had nothing. He couldn't make sense of it. He had only wanted to make his own life a little better. Why did they have to treat him like this? What, exactly, had he done wrong? Outside the window, the sky darkened, and streetlights came on one by one. The dim yellow glow stretched Ji-Yuan's shadow long and thin, and he was like a fish hooked by its own shadow and dragged ashore, thrashing and gasping. Yet no matter what, unable to get back into the water. 11 Soon, Jiu Shici was admitted to the business school of a top university in China with the third highest score in the city. The day the results came out, Jiu Zhongwo spun around in his office 3 times in delight, then immediately called to reserve a banquet and said he wanted to celebrate my daughter's name on the honor roll. At the banquet, after drinking quite a bit, his face flushed red as Jiu Zhongwo said, the thing I'm most proud of in my life, Jiu Zhongwo, is not how much money I've made, but having such a wonderful daughter. Jiu Shici sat beside him and poured him a cup of tea. Dad, drink less. Happy today. Jiu Zhongwo drained it in one gulp, then took her hand. Dad knows you've got something on your mind, but I want you to know that no matter what happens, Dad will always be behind you. Feeling the warmth from her father's palm, Jiu Shici felt her heart grow warm. I know, Dad, thank you, she said, her voice a bit hoarse. What's there to thank? Jiu Zhongwo waved his hand dismissively. You're my daughter, who else would I protect if not you? Ji-Yuan's college entrance exam results were another story altogether. He didn't drop out. Instead, he worked at construction sites while going to school. Now, he hadn't been admitted to any university. On the day the scores came out, he sat alone on the bed in his rented room, staring at the numbers on his phone screen, expressionless. Just over 300. This score isn't even enough to get into the most ordinary second-tier university. His mother sat in the living room, silent for a long time. Maybe you could go work at the factory. Your Uncle Zhong is the workshop supervisor there. He could arrange a job for you. Ji-Yuan said nothing. He stood up, walked into the bathroom, closed the door, and turned on the faucet. The water gushed and ran. He stood before the mirror, looking at the gaunt face reflected there, the eyes beneath it laced with bloodshot veins. Was this still the GU and who had been in the top 3 of his grade before? He suddenly smiled at the mirror. The smile was bitter and astringent, like chewing a handful of unripe hawthorn. He remembered the year he started 7th grade. The first time he noticed Jiu Shitsi, she sat by the window in the classroom, sunlight falling on her profile as she lowered her head to read, her eyelashes casting a small shadow beneath her eyes. At that moment, what crossed his mind was that this girl came from a wealthy family. Not this girl is beautiful, not this girl is gentle, not this girl has a lovely smile. From that moment on, he saw her as a target, a tool that could help him transcend social classes. He spent 2 years studying her, getting close to her, and pleasing her. He exhausted all his tricks and schemes, disguising himself as a perfect, strong, and pitiable person, but he forgot one thing. Jiu Shitsi was not a tool. Not a stepping stone, not a gold mine to be exploited at will. She was a person of flesh and blood, with feelings and dignity, and he had never truly regarded her as a person. Ji-Yuan turned off the faucet, wiped her face with a towel, then walked out of the bathroom. "Mom, I'm going to the factory," he said. His voice was calm, like an adult who had finally accepted reality. Liu Ruyan's situation was slightly better than Ji-Yuan's. To be precise, she was admitted to a 3rd-tier university, majoring in business administration. When choosing this major, her reasoning was simple. Studying this would allow her to stand better by Ji-Yuan's side. As for whether this major was actually useful for someone from a 3rd-tier university like her, Liu Ruyan didn't care. She sat in her new school dormitory, applying makeup in front of the mirror, foundation, eyeliner, lipstick. Every step was done meticulously. Her makeup skills had improved a lot since high school, with a clean and refined finish that made her look a few years older than her actual age. She smiled at herself in the mirror, then picked up her phone and opened the photo album. The album was filled with many photos. The teaching building of her new school, meals from the cafeteria, the layout of her dorm room, clothes she had tried on while shopping. Each photo had been carefully edited, with filters applied just right, making it look like a standard, peaceful college life. But her fingers slid past those photos and stopped on an old picture. It was a photo from her first year of high school, a picture of her and Ji-Yuan. The two of them stood on the school rooftop. The sunlight was bright, and Ji-Yuan wore a blue school uniform. Tilting his head slightly with a faint smile at the corner of his mouth, she stood beside him, flashing a peace sign, her eyes crinkling with laughter. Liu Ruyan looked at the photo and gave a slight, subtle smile, disappearing and reappearing at just the right moments. This was a must-have skill. For the white moonlight, she locked her phone, placed it on the table, picked up the mirror again, and continued applying her makeup. She no longer thought of Ji-Yuan, although it will still be some time before that project succeeds, but she is still young now, and she needs to find a better goal in college. 12. The 4 years of university were the time when Jiu Shitsi truly began to exert her full effort. She was no longer confined to textbook knowledge, delving deeply into the front lines of school enterprise collaboration to develop her own supply chain optimization plan. After reviewing the plan, the company's head remained silent for a long time before saying, "Even our most experienced supply chain manager might not have been able to come up with this plan." After implementation, the plan saved the company 12% in costs, equivalent to approximately 8 million yuan. When the news reached Jiu Zhongwo's ears, he was drinking tea in his office. After listening to the assistant's report, he froze for a long while with his teacup in hand. Then he set the cup down and picked up his phone to send his daughter a message. "Girl, you're amazing. Your dad's impressed." Jiu Shitsi was in the library reading when she saw the message. She couldn't help but smile, then replied, "As you wish." Jiu Zhongwo replied instantly, "Ha ha 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 ha, my daughter is incredible." In the end, Jiu Shitsi graduated as the top student in the entire class and received the business school's Outstanding Graduate Award. At the graduation ceremony, she took the stage as the student representative to give a speech, and the moment she stood there, she saw her father sitting in the 3rd row. Jiu Zhongwo was dressed in a brand new dark blue suit, his hair neatly combed. Beside him sat several of his old subordinates from the company, all of them dragged there by Jiu Zhongwo to show up for my girl. Looking at her father, Jiyu Shitsi suddenly felt a sting in her nose. She took a deep breath and began her speech. The speech was very brief, less than 5 minutes. She didn't talk about lofty principles or inspirational stories. She simply said a few words of thanks, then shared one viewpoint. Many people ask me why I study business. My answer is, because I have seen what money looks like when it is wasted. And I have seen what money looks like when it is cherished. I hope that one day, every penny in my hands will go where it is meant to go. The audience erupted into thunderous applause. By contrast, Ji-Yuan's life after failing to get into college seemed to have been fast-forwarded by someone. Passing in a dazed and muddled haze, he stood on an assembly line in a factory for 3 months, repeating the same motion thousands of times every day until his fingers blistered and then calloused over. He couldn't take it anymore. He quit his job and returned to this city with the few thousand yuan he had saved from the assembly line. He met Zhao Peng, and young men like him, all hoping to find a shortcut, in the rental room he lived in within the urban village. Zhao Peng was 2 years older than him, quick-tongued and sharp-minded. With only one flaw, he had no real bottom line. The two hit it off at once, pooled together some money, and registered a small renovation company in name only, really just a shell, no qualifications, no crew, no portfolio, only 2 silver tongues and hearts hungry for quick money. They targeted clients who didn't know the trade, setting traps in the contract, passing off inferior materials as good ones, and inflating quotes. In the beginning, they really did make some money, and that money gave Ji-Yuan a taste for it. He bought himself a decent suit, tidied himself back into that gentle, refined appearance, and then dialed a number. Liu Ruyan. He had arranged to meet her at a Western restaurant, to thank her for the support she had given him in high school. Liu Ruyan came wearing a goose yellow dress, her makeup exquisite, even more beautiful than she had been in high school. When she looked at the bank card Ji-Yuan handed her, containing 50,000 yuan, a flicker of complex emotion passed through her eyes. When Ji-Yuan found her, she had thought that dream was about to come true. She had thought he was the Ji-Yuan under the spotlight, the man standing at the peak of success. But the Ji-Yuan before her, though dressed in a suit and speaking all the right polite words, carried in his bones a kind of embarrassment that was hard to name. The way he kept confirming the prices when ordering, the slightly trembling fingers when he paid the bill, the eagerness in his voice as he tried so hard to prove himself. All of it was worlds away from the man in her dream, and it was at that very moment that Zhao Peng appeared. Zhao Peng's interest in Liu Ruyan was not the heartfelt kind of liking, but rather the way a gambler might set his sights on a piece on the board that could be used as collateral. Liu Ruyan's interest in Zhao Peng was also not the fluttering, heart-stirring sort of attraction, but rather the way a speculator might take notice of another road that could possibly lead upward. The two drew close, each harboring ulterior motives. While Ji-Yuan remained completely in the dark, Zhao Peng took on a few half-finished, doomed projects and touted them as big projects with high returns, urging Ji-Yuan to pour all his money into them. Ji-Yuan hesitated, but Zhao Peng brought Liu Ruyan to speak on his behalf before him, those water-laden eyes looking at him as she said, "I think Brother Peng is right this time." Ji-Yuan believed them and lost everything. The project had been a trap set by someone else. The client had run. The suppliers came to the door demanding payment, and the workers blocked the entrance to the company with protest banners. Only then did Ji-Yuan realize that the company's seal, the contracts, and the bank accounts were all in Zhao Peng's hands, and Zhao Peng and Liu Ruyan had already vanished without a trace. They had swindled away more than 400,000 yuan. For Ji-Yuan, that was everything he owned, plus a mountain of debt. His phone rang from morning till night. Every call was a debt collector. Their tone shifted from polite to threatening, and from threatening to menacing. Ji-Yuan started hiding. He changed to 3 different rented rooms, turned off his phone, and didn't dare go out in broad daylight. Like a rat with its tail broken under a boot, he curled up in the darkest corner of the city, even breathing cautiously. He didn't even know how he managed to survive 13. After graduating, Jiyu Shitsi officially joined the Jiyu group. Unlike other second-generation heirs, she did not parachute directly into management but started from the grassroots level. In her 5th year at the company, she was formally appointed vice president of the group. becoming the youngest executive in the history of the GU Group. That afternoon the appointment notice was issued. GU Jongwo called her into his office, looking at the daughter he had raised with his own hands. GU Jongwo's eyes held a pride he could not hide. "Girl, the luckiest thing in my life has been having a daughter like you." GU Shitsi looked at the man who had once been so full of youthful vigor. White hairs had begun to appear at his temples, and the crow's feet at the corners of his eyes were much deeper than before, but his smile was still as warm as ever. "Dad, I'm the lucky one," she said softly. "Being your daughter is the greatest luck of my life." GU Jongwo's eyes turned slightly red. He cleared his throat and smiled. "What would you like to eat tonight?" "Dad will make it for you." "Braised pork ribs." "Okay, braised pork ribs. I'll make you some soup too." Later on, GU Shitsi met someone during a business negotiation. His name was Shenyanqing, 32 years old. The heir to a family business, but not the kind of pampered wastrel who only lounged under the shade of his ancestors. He had started his own business and worked in investment, and he had an excellent reputation in the circle. Low-key and reserved by nature, he neither smoked nor drank, and his only hobby was running marathons. The two of them spent 3 hours in the conference room discussing the project cooperation, ranging from business models to industry trends. From management philosophy to life experiences, Shenyanqing discovered that this girl, who was 4 years younger than him, had far deeper insights into business than many people he knew, not the kind of depth that existed only on paper, but one that had been tested in practice. After discussing the collaboration, Shenyanqing escorted her to the elevator and suddenly said, "President GU, aside from our project cooperation, may I invite you to dinner?" GU Shisi glanced at him. His gaze was clear and unclouded. No scheming, no ingratiation, only pure admiration. After that meal, the two of them began seeing each other frequently. Shenyanqing was a very good person, not the kind of good to you that could be so easily put on. That sort of goodness was far too easy to fake. Rather, it was a respect and kindness that came from the bones, from the heart. He respected every decision she made, supported every choice she took, never bothered her when she was busy, and handed her a cup of hot water when she was tired. He didn't know how to speak those sweet nothings, nor did he create those grand, earth-shaking romances. His goodness was like spring rain, gentle and silent, falling without a sound. By the time you came to your senses, the flowers had already bloomed. After more than a year together, Shenyanqing proposed to her. The proposal was very simple. After one ordinary dinner, he took a small box out of his pocket. Inside was a very understated diamond ring. "GU Shitsi, I want to walk the rest of the way with you. Will you?" GU Shitsi looked at the ring and remained silent for a long time. She thought of the grand press conference in her previous life, and of herself taking off the ring and turning away. Her marriage in her past life had been a complete, utter scam. She had given a person all her heart, only to receive betrayal and abandonment in return. But Shenyanqing was not Ji Yuan. She had confirmed that fact long ago. By contrast, Ji Yuan saw GU Shitsi's wedding invitation in someone else's. The invitation was embossed in gold and exquisitely designed, bearing the names of GU Shitsi and another man. The man's surname was unfamiliar to him, but he vaguely remembered seeing it in a business magazine somewhere before. A truly respectable family, one that didn't need to rely on deceit to maintain its dignity. Ji Yuan stared at the invitation, and suddenly his head split with pain. Then he remembered everything: the spotlight at the press conference, GU Shitsi's hand as she took off her ring, the cold verdict on the courtroom table, the shameless look on his son's face as he naturally held out his hand for money, and, even earlier, those scenes he had deliberately forgotten, GU Shitsi's father sitting across from him, sliding a bank card over and saying, "Kid, work hard, I believe in you." GU Shitsi staying up late to help him revise his business plan, falling asleep slumped over the desk, and him draping a coat over her shoulders while thinking, "This woman is so useful." He remembered everything. It turned out that his success in his previous life had never been because he was so capable. It was GU Shitsi. It was her money, her connections, her father's resources, her unconditional trust and support, and after he had drained her dry, he threw her away like a used tissue. Ji Yuan was trembling all over, not from remorse, but from a more primal, more naked emotion, unwillingness. If he could succeed in his previous life, why couldn't he in this one? As long as Ji Yu Shitsi helped him one more time, as long as she softened her heart once more. On the day of the engagement banquet, Ji Yu Jongwo, dressed in a red tang suit, personally drove to see his daughter off, and Ji Yu also took a 2-hour bus ride to the wedding hotel. The hotel was grand, more luxurious than any venue he had ever seen. He stood at the entrance and was stopped by security. He waited in the cold wind for 3 hours, until he saw Ji Yu Shitsi step out of a black sedan. She was wearing a wedding dress, not one of those exaggerated, puffed-up gowns, but a simple satin dress with a long skirt. Her hair was pinned up, revealing her slender neck and delicate earrings. She was a little taller than she had been at 15, her features more fully developed, but that quiet, composed air of hers hadn't changed at all. She was holding the arm of a man, tall, clean-cut, with steady eyes, the kind of man who had clearly grown up surrounded by love and abundance. Ji Yuan rushed forward. Sishi, his voice was shaking. I remember now, I remember everything. In our past life, we were husband and wife. You helped me, and I failed you. But this life is different. I know I was wrong. Give me one more chance. He did not finish because Ji Yu Shitsi stopped walking and turned back to look at him. That look was utterly calm. There was no anger, no disgust, not even pity, only calm, as if she were looking at a stranger, one begging by the roadside, a stranger who had nothing to do with her. Ji Yuan, she said, her voice not loud, but every word was crystal clear. In my past life, what you owed me was not just an apology, but an entire life. In this one, you've lost your chance, not because I won't give you one, but because you yourself have never truly cherished any chance anyone ever gave you. After speaking, she took her father's arm and walked into the hotel. Ji Yuan was held on the left and right by the 2 security guards at the entrance. They dragged him to the roadside, where he fell hard against the curb and scraped his knee until it bled. The hotel doors slowly closed before his eyes, and the lights, music, and laughter inside all became sounds from another world. He didn't cry, he simply sat on the cold ground, looking down at his dust-covered leather shoes, when suddenly he thought of many years ago, back in 9th grade, when he first noticed Ji Yu Shitsi. She was sitting by the window in the classroom, sunlight falling across her profile, her head lowered as she read a book. What was he thinking at that time? This girl's family was very rich. From that moment on, he had already lost. Ji Yu Jongwo looked at his daughter. There were things he wanted to say, but in the end, they too turned into him, gripping his daughter's hand tightly. Dad will always be your support. My daughter deserves the very best. At the wedding, he held Shen Yanqing's hand and said earnestly, Xiaoshen, I'm entrusting Shitsi to you. If you ever treat her badly, no matter how big your family is or how much money you have, I, Ji Yu Jongwo, will be the first to object. Shen Yanqing nodded solemnly. Uncle Ji Yu, please rest assured, Shitsi is the best person I've ever met. I won't let her suffer even the slightest grievance. Ji Yu Jongwo was also satisfied as he raised his wineglass and drank it all in one gulp. Ji Yu Shitsi sat beside them, looking at her father's reddened eyes and Shen Yanqing's solemn expression, and suddenly felt a warmth rise in her own. She lowered her head and pretended to smooth out her skirt, using the motion to force her tears back. She couldn't cry. Today was a day for joy. On her 30th birthday, Ji Yu Jongwo formally transferred his company shares to Ji Yu Shitsi. She became the largest shareholder of the Ji Yu Group, and also its true helmsperson. That night, she stood alone before the floor-to-ceiling window of her office, gazing down at the city's nightscape. Neon lights flickered, traffic streamed like a woven river along the overpass, and in the distance the lights from both banks shimmered in reflection on the river's surface. Looking at this brilliantly lit city, she suddenly thought of her previous life. Thinking back to her former self at 45, in her previous life, she had believed that kindness was the greatest virtue, that being good to everyone would earn the same kind of return. She had given Ji Yu and her resources, her money, and her connections without reservation, thinking she was helping someone worth helping. She had treated Liu Ruyan as her best friend, believing she was warming a soul in need of warmth. And what was the result? The result was inviting a wolf into the house, raising a tiger only to bring disaster upon herself, feeding her own flesh and blood to 2 starving wolves. But this life was different. In this life, she had learned to refuse, learned to protect herself, learned to reserve her kindness for those who deserved it. She did not take revenge on Ji Yuan and Liu Ruyan. She simply no longer gave them the chance to hurt her. She walked her own path and let them walk theirs. And that path led to a completely different destination. As for the young man named Gun, he was working part-time at an auto repair shop to pay off his debts. He got up at 6 every morning and clocked out at 10 at night, earning 120 yuan a day. His hands were no longer the long, clean hands suited to holding a pen and signing contracts. Black grease was forever embedded beneath his fingernails. There were burn scars on the backs of his hands, and his knuckles had grown thick and deformed from constant strain. Wearing overalls stained with oil, he would sometimes crouch in the pit changing engine oil and look up through the shop's grey, hazy glass door at the world outside. Office workers in suits and ties, students with backpacks, parents holding their children's hands. They all walked their own paths, breathing the same air beneath the same sky in the same city as he did. Yet it felt as if an invisible wall separated them. Sometimes, late at night after finishing work, he would sit on the bunk in the dormitory and stare blankly at his own hands. He would think of how those same hands in his previous life had signed contracts worth tens of millions. Think of the spotlight at press conferences. Think of the arc the ring had traced in the light when Gu Shitsi took it off. Hatred and remorse were like two snakes, taking turns to tear at his heart. He hated Zhao Peng, hated Liu Ruyan, hated this world for treating him unfairly, but more often than not, the one he hated was Gu Shitsi, hated her for not helping him, hated her for refusing to give him another chance, hated her for being able to leave so cleanly, so decisively, so utterly without room for compromise. Now and then, in the gaps when the tide of hatred receded, he would think of other things. He would remember that year in 8th grade, when he first saw Gu Shitsi feeding a stray cat in the hallway. She crouched on the floor, pouring milk into a little dish, and softly said, "Drink slowly, don't rush." The sunlight fell on her hair, and her smile was gentle and warm back then. Standing at the other end of the hallway, looking at that scene, all he thought was that this girl had a soft heart, can be used. Ji-Yuan closed his eyes and buried his face in those hands caked with oil stains. He never thought of that afternoon again. In this life, everyone walked the path they were meant to take. In this life, everything was just right.